All right. First, I'd like to say welcome everyone and invite guests who have come to the second episode of Mixing Mondays. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Scott, my co-host.
Hello, I'm Liam from the UK.
So in short, what these are, Mixing Mondays, is just roundtable discussions. Liam and I claim to be no experts on anything. We're not presenting to as though we were on a virtual stage in front of everybody. This is just, we're all sitting down, exchanging stories, talk as little or as much as you want. Nothing has to be prepared. We prepare some topics, but all they are is for just discussion. So, because we have a bunch of new people on this one, I'm going to start out with just kind of a fun icebreaker question. Just kind of briefly introduce yourself, and you're on tour. Within reason, you were said, the tour manager said, all right, get to pick any soundboard or piece of equipment you want to bring. You get a week ahead of time to get familiar with it. What do you bring? I pick for soundboard, I would pick Yamaha CL5. So whoever wants to go first can go.
I'll go. I would pick, which I've used, if there was any still in good working order, an old ATI Paragon. For any of you who are too young to know what that is, it's an old analog console that sounded amazing.
Cool. Just before we carry on, is it worth? Shall we go through people's backgrounds just so that everyone knows who each other is? Michelle, what's your history in the industry?
I've been a touring front of house engineer for almost 30 years. My first tour was with Spin Doctors in 1992, and I've been doing it ever since. I most recently been working with Elvis Costello, and we were on tour in the UK until mid-March when COVID hit and everybody had to go home. So.
Yeah. Who's next? Come on, Elliot. Represent the Goes to 11 crowd with your
Michelle stole my line. Yeah, it's a virtual background we'll be working on for the small business that I run, which is there's the background question. At the moment, I'm trying to break more into touring, my house tech, and various other things. And 2020 was going to be the big year of touring, so that went great. Desk wise, as I say, Michelle stole my thunder because I was just going to go big old analog. Like Midas, probably something like that.
I guess I'll go next.
Lauren.
I'm an audio engineer for the last 14 years. I do front of house monitors, system teching, tour managing, production managing. The last few years last year I was on tour with Lizzo for the entire year as her monitor engineer, and the year before that I was on tour with Michael Bolton doing monitors. My console of choice right now would probably, if I were doing monitors, I would stick with my Digico SD12. If I were doing front of house, however, it's a different story. If I were doing front of house, I would probably pick what is it? The Heritage, a Heritage for front of house. If it had to be digital, I'd pick an SSL.
Cool.
All right. Hi, I'm Fela. I'm front of house for Christian McBride, a jazz bassist. Go around the world with him. Anything Digico, I'm pretty good on. So yeah, that's my favorite. And pretty much just go all around the world with him. And now I own my own podcast studio, so that's my next move now. So
cool.
In Fort Lee, New Jersey. So nice to meet everybody.
Susan.
Hello, I'm Susan. I have been working in production for about a decade. I'm a teacher now, so I teach video production. I've moved quite a bit away from doing live sound, but I still do it occasionally. I'm pretty good with any console other than Yamaha. So those are the ones that I avoid. And then any of the other ones, I used to teach a class called digital consoles, so I can pretty much figure them out and I'm cool with them. But Yamaha, the on buttons just get me. Can't do it.
I have very little experience with Yamaha. Is this on buttons as opposed to mute buttons?
You have to turn the channel on instead of mute it.
You have to turn it on.
It's
like an opposite brain function for me.
Yeah, that would be fine.
The gain is all the way down here.
Broadcast or something, but no, I would have that backwards constantly.
Yeah. I don't know. Y'all love CL5s in Europe.
Yep.
Anyone else from Goes to 11 want to speak? Alish?
Hey guys.
The crowd.
My name is Alish. I'm the one that has all these weird squiggly things above my name. That's because I come from Slovenia, Europe, lovely country, and I've been talking to Liam just on another Zoom call that this is a place where when all of the things sort of get released and travel is an option for us. You should come and visit us and say hi. I've been a touring engineer, front of house for the last 7-8 years, but now I'm mostly doing monitors for a rock band from Slovenia called Siddhartha. I also have online courses where I teach together with Nathan Lively. And yeah, I think I've met most of you guys through Live Sound Summit in one form or another. If you were one of the lucky ones, I might have sent you home just before you started the presentation. But yeah, other than that, I'm really enjoying these conversations with you guys. So console-wise, go big or go home. I'm gonna say Digico 383, the new one, just because I've never seen it live. So hey, let's see what all the bells and whistles do.
Just on second.
Yeah. If I were front of house, if I were monitors, then SD12, I would second Lorene's choice. It's just, I just love that console. And yeah, and we do love Yamahas in Europe. That's true.
Strange how few of them I've seen in my career. I mean, I've been venue tech for. I was in the same venue for 16 years, and I did see Yamahas, but they were by no means the most popular brand.
They're not a touring desk.
They're not a what? Sorry, not a touring desk.
No, not a lot of people carry a CL5 or anything.
No.
Not that in the US. I don't know. I did tons of festivals in Europe when we didn't have our own gear, and literally every single festival had a CL5 on stage doing monitors. So every single one.
Okay.
Except for in England, where they had Digico on stage.
I think that might be the fact. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think Digico is also in England, is a company based in England. So
yeah.
Maybe that helps with the distribution of it. And I have also only recently have I even seen CL5s on tours coming through. Mostly if it's a Yamaha, it's the Rivage. Let's see here. Who hasn't gone?
Laura.
I am not a sound engineer. I'm a backliner, tour manager, merchandiser. I've been doing this thing called a career full-time for 18. I started in 95 part-time, mainly working for rock and metal bands, like the 500 to 5 or 8,000 capacity venues. That sort of bands, headlining big festivals for 80K people, mostly Europe, but all of the continents except for Antarctica have been ticked off my list multiple times. As far as gear, any lights that are side stage that don't actually blind me, thank you.
All right, Jason, are you able to unmute yourself?
I can. Can you hear me?
Hi, Jason.
Hey, what's up, guys? Sorry I'm a little bit late. I just ran out of a presentation that I was in and now I'm driving.
It's all right. Thanks for being here.
I have my phone rested on a stand. But yeah, just to introduce myself, I've been touring for 16 years professionally. I'm the production manager and monitor engineer for Shaggy. I'm also, I used to be day-to-day monitor engineer for Stephen Marley. I've since handed that off, so now I only go out when the Marley brothers perform together. So I'm one of the monitor engineers. I mix all the in-ear mixes for the Marley brothers. I also manage all the strategic relationships, so all our vendor relationships I manage for the Marley brothers, which includes Clear Global, who is our production supplier. And I'm the tour manager and front of house engineer for the band Magic. My console of choice depends on the act. When I'm out with Shaggy, I'm on a SD7 Quantum normally. If we're touring with gear, with the Marley brothers, we've since switched from the Quantum 7 to the 338. So myself and the other monitor engineer are both on 338, and with Magic, I'm usually on an SD12. So that's kind of I'm a digital guy through and through. I don't use anything else.
Liam and I joked the reason why we invited you, Jason. I was like, yeah, Liam, you want someone who uses the Digico, don't you?
Yeah, I'm openly vocal about my distaste of certain other consoles. So for those who follow me on Instagram and Facebook, you've seen my epic rants on other consoles that have crashed on me in the middle of a show. So, yeah.
I'm assuming you're talking about the S6L because
yeah.
Same.
Yeah, I've actually had an S6L console. I was we were in Mumbai with Magic just before New Year's doing a show for 15,000 people. They brought in an SD10 for me, but they didn't have a processor at front of house, so they were running AVB into a L acoustic system, so I had to route my audio through the S6L, and the S6L crashed on the third song. Nobody was even touching it. It's fantastic. So, yeah.
Yeah, I got to experience the Radiohead crash at Coachella 2 years ago. I was working so I remember that.
Can you say that a little bit more? And you're kind of cut out a bit.
Yeah, she was talking about the epic fail that Radiohead had with that console at Coachella. Yeah, a few years ago is what she's talking about. I think most of us had heard about that.
Yeah, I've heard stories about that.
You guys, oh, well, that was fun. It literally, I don't know how to explain this because I literally heard it. I was working outdoor theater and I got lost going back to my campground. So there's one way where it's like half a mile to get to the campground, and there's another way where it's like 2 miles. And I was on a bike. I took the long way, which went behind the main stage. So I was like riding my bike behind the main stage, dying and cursing my life right now because it's 100 degrees and I have to ride a bike 2 miles. And all of a sudden I'm like riding behind, and I hear what sounds like you know, in movies where you do like an ocean scene and there's like that horn that's like, right? You know what I'm talking about? That's the sound that the PA made. And then I heard silence and I was like, well, maybe it's part of the show. Like, you know, maybe
you never tell with the Radiohead.
Yeah, you can't tell from the backside of the stage what's going on. So I don't know. So I'm like still riding along, still like, and all of a sudden I just hear the crowd. You just hear the of the crowd. And I'm like, oh no. And then you hear them start up again, and then it crashes immediately again. It crashed twice, and then they took a pause for 20 minutes. The funniest part about that is next week, there were 4 S6Ls in front of house with 8 Avid guys all standing there like this, all networked together. Like I wish I could have taken a picture, but they wouldn't let anybody in front of house.
This conversation should have happened a few hours ago. We had another Zoom session where we've all been listening to some comparison tracks between an SD10 and an S6L. So we got into a conversation comparing sonically the difference between the Avids and the Digicos. But not once did we touch on reliability. So this would have been interesting a few hours back. And to be honest, I'm surprised that Scott Adamson's not here, but saying that he's somewhere that looked, from the conversation we were having, it looked pretty picturesque. So he's probably enjoying the countryside somewhere and the sunshine, because It's a lot earlier for you guys than it is here. What time is it? It's 8:20. Apart from
I mean,
for Alish and I would imagine Laura.
I think there's an interesting construct with that conversation about sonic quality, because there's quite a significant difference between a digital running the 24-bit cards and the ones that run the 32-bit cards.
Strong agree.
So usually when people bring that conversation up, a 32-bit card is like an Avid SXL 24-bit card is not going to be able to compete with the signal to noise on a 32-bit card. It's numbers. It's ones and zeros. It's just not possible. So I think that conversation's an interesting one. But like you said, it doesn't matter how great your console sounds if it doesn't work.
Yeah, the conversation came up about the 32-bit cards, and Scott unfortunately wasn't sure which cards it had been that were in the rack at the time, so we didn't really get to find out whether we were comparing apples to apples or not. But yeah, it was still an interesting conversation. There was still some differences that we could hear.
The 32-bit card completely changes the game. Like, completely changes it. Like, I will never use a Digico console without like a 32-bit card in it ever again, because I got to compare them directly on my tour this year with Lizzo. We went from a SD12 that didn't have the cards in them, and literally the next tour I had one that had the cards in them, and I didn't have to use like any waves to make my shit sound decent, like, at all. Oh, sorry, I cursed.
No, don't worry. I'm making sure when I'm uploading this, there's an option in YouTube says, is this meant for children? I every time click no. This is.
It's hard to self-edit around my people. I'm really sorry. Like, we all know we sit in a circle after a show and curse like sailors. So let's be real.
Yeah.
So quickly without getting too.
Larry, also a kind of unique note. So Brandon Blackwell is a great friend of mine. So.
Oh, really?
Yeah, kind of small world. I just heard you. I thought I heard you say Lizzo before, and then you said it again, and I was like, oh, cool. That's dope. Yeah, Brandon's a good friend of mine.
Brandon's a great dude. He was an excellent addition to our crew. I was the original front of house engineer for Lizzo back when, right before she blew up. I was doing everything by myself from front of house, like monitors, wireless, front of house, all from my station by myself. I had no tech. And that Brandon came on right in the transition to our summer one, and he took over front of house, which, like, if we didn't have Brandon, like, if he and I weren't the team that we were for all of this, like, Lizzo would have never made it through to her fall tour.
He's a great guy.
I know that we're all talking about gear here, but and it's been a wonderful conversation, but I do know that we were all here to talk about a very specific subject, and I don't want us to wander too far down the tech line, you know, because we can nerd out about it all day. That could be a whole nother call.
We can, and it'll probably, I would imagine, with any luck, this conversation is going to kind of swing backwards and forwards between a few different directions.
Yeah, no,
and perfect.
And thank you, Lauren. It was just more, that was just so we don't, it was more just kind of get the conversation started and get on some common ground. So we're not just immediately like, boom, heavy topic. We're like, no, let's start with the fun stuff and then ease in. So thank you, Lauren, for kind of getting on it. So again, as Liam and I kind of suggested earlier, we realized it's like two cis white guys talking about diversity is not going to, so that's the main reason why we invited everybody. And again, thank you for coming. But so that's kind of what we're starting in. This is not a bitch fest. We can tell stories, good, bad, in between experiences. But at the end of the day, this is more just a discussion to get it out there. We're not claiming, all right, we're going to find the solution to make the world instantly better in 2 hours. No, that's not. It's just, let's get this conversation going. So I'll kind of just lead into this question. No one has to really directly answer it, but just kind of, let's start with the topic of just kind of everyone's experience, whether you're local like me, I'm IATSE, so I kind of stick to one area, or if on tour or wherever your work location may be, it's like, how was your experience whether that anything that pretty much wasn't cis white male, or just in general, your experience in your work of how little or how much diversity there was. So I'll kind of just start.
Sorry, I
go
was
ahead.
going to say I would actually quite like to just expand on one of the things you were saying there. Is I'd quite like to work out if there are areas of the industry that in general are more diverse than others, you know, whether it's that touring is more diverse than local crews, or whether it's certain areas of the country are more diverse than others, which obviously is the reason why we wanted to ask everyone to get involved, because, you know, asking one person what their experience with this kind of subject is a little bit of a waste of time. It's, you know, unless it's the most experienced person in the world, and even then they're only looking at it through their own set of eyes. So ideally, I personally, I'd love to hear good, bad, any kind of experience that anyone has had in terms of diversity. And I know that's a really broad subject; it could mean anything. So if anyone's had any experience with it in any regard, then feel free to tell that story. Like Scott said, this is not, and one thing that Susan said at the start of her talk during the Live Sound Summit was, it's not intended to be a 2-hour session of pointing fingers and shouting at people, but if there are things that people can be doing that can be productive, that can be constructive, then, you know, maybe the more we talk about those things, the better. And getting other people's point of views, you know, it can only help. So do we have anyone that would like to share anything first of all? Michelle?
Find the mute button here. Yeah, I should have also mentioned I am the co-founder of soundgirls.org, and I originally started working in live sound back in the 80s. And Carrie Kais, who is the co-founder of Soundgirls, we back at that time, I think we were both the only other women doing live sound that we each knew of. It took us 20 some years to actually meet face to face, which is when we started Soundgirls. But my experience in the business, I've done tours, plenty of tours where I was the only woman. I've done tours where there was only one man. I've been on I worked for Indigo Girls for about 8-9 years. And with Indigo Girls, we did every one of the original Lilith festivals, which ironically, being a big women's festival, it was most of the time I was the only woman doing sound on that show, on that tour. I had heard rumors that there were one other woman who was doing Lilith Fair, but I thought it was kind of ironic that I'm the only, you know, female engineer on this tour. And then a few years later, Indigo Girls did a tour where everyone on the crew was a woman except for the tour manager. I also worked for Natasha Bedingfield, where we had a female monitor engineer, female backline tech. So I've kind of, you know, been on both sides of it, where you're the only woman or where there's you know, very few other men. I also did Goo Goo Dolls a few years ago, and Reggie Griffiths, who's Black Man, was doing front of house for Daughtry. So we were kind of at the helm of, like two minorities at the helm of a huge summer shed tour. And in all of that, you know, in my entire career, it's never been about being a female engineer or a woman audio engineer. It's just been, this is my job. This is what I do. it's never been an issue for me. I've never run into, I should say never, but Carrie and I talked about this a lot when we started Soundgirls. It's like, you know, when we got started, you could count on one hand how many women there were in this business. But we never really felt like we met with a lot of sexism. When we did, it was usually from local crew, or in my case, the bouncer at the club who didn't believe I was actually there to work. It was never from my fellow crew or the artists that I worked for. I don't know if I've been lucky, and I think Carrie said the same thing. It's, you know, we had the mutual respect of our crew. We were, you know, we were a family. We were all part of the same team, and we never experienced any kind of, oh, well, you can't do this, you know, anything that stood in our way of doing our jobs. unfortunately, in the last several years, I've seen, well, since we started Sound Girls, in the last probably 4 or 5 years, we've been hearing a lot of stories how that has kind of gone backwards. There's a lot more sexism these days. And I don't know if it's the whole thing that back when we started, we were kind of the unicorn, like, oh, isn't that cute? There's a girl front of house engineer. And now there's a lot more of them. There are a lot more women in this business. And is it now that a lot of the guys feel that's a threat, or that we're competing for the same jobs? Is it the climate? You know, our political climate right now is not the most tolerant of anything. So it's hard to say where it's coming from, but I've probably had the two of the most sexist things ever said to me in the last 3 years. And both of them were by old white guys in their 60s. And they were so comical that I couldn't do anything but laugh. But it's never been an issue that it's held me back from doing my job. But I've been witnessing it more and more and hearing horror stories, not only about sexism, but sexual harassment and inappropriate, advances from men that women are working with, which it's astonishing to me that as we're progressing forward in time, it seems like we're regressing in these issues. And there are actually, I've been getting asked a lot lately when I do talks and webinars from men that want to support women in this business, of what steps they can take to do that and how they can do that. And there are some really simple, basic things that men can do. One is just treat the women that you work with the same respect, treat them equal to any guy that you would work with. It's not that hard. Women are not asking for special treatment. They just want to be accepted as, your fellow crew person. Other things are, if someone asks you a question that should be directed to a woman on the crew or a woman on your team, direct them to that person rather than just answering the question. That's kind of something that could be, across the board, whether it's you're the monitor tech and they're asking, who's your sound man? And Beth is your sound engineer, point them towards Beth. Or if they're asking a question that should be related to another man on the crew, we all want to have answers to questions when we're asked, but if it's not our department, we should always be directing people to the appropriate department. Another huge thing, which I think men sometimes do this thinking they're helping, but it really isn't helping. Don't vouch for us. Unless you're being consulted as a job reference or to give a recommendation for a woman that's being considered for a job, there's no need to vouch for the women on your crew. Like, for example, house production guy asks, where's your sound man? And you're like, oh, well, that's our sound engineer. But that's okay, don't worry about it. She's really good. She knows her stuff. That happens so much more than you would believe. Mm-hmm. And it's totally unnecessary. And it really does not help make the situation a bit more equal. It's almost kind of like, oh, well, we have a female front of house, but don't worry, she's okay. She can do it. She'll cut it. You would never say those things about a fellow, male crew person. So those are just a couple simple things that guys can do. And also, just if you witness something that makes a woman on your crew or on the local crew or anywhere around you uncomfortable, say something. The biggest thing is a lot of the younger women getting started in this industry are kind of between a rock and a hard place, because if they experience something, they are more at fear of losing the job by speaking up than the fear of having to deal with whatever is making them uncomfortable, because they don't have the reputation and the time in the industry to know that they can say something and it's okay. It's just a tough situation. So if they need the support of people around them to say, hey, are you uncomfortable with that? Because I can, say something if you'd like. So that is a huge thing. Just, be wary of the women that you're working with, and when they need your support, be there for them.
Thank you, Michelle. And you also, there's, not to try and take anyone out of turn, but you also brought up a great point that as much as our industry is amazing, we create magic when the world isn't in a pandemic. But one of the things is male, female, color, regardless, there is a lot of harassment in our industry. And whether I've gotten it as a white male, I still, from my contemporaries and olders, there's stuff I've told my sponsor, I'm like, if the stuff that has been said and done to me was done at any other job, there would have been lawsuits, people would have been fired, it would have made the news. But because our industry, it's this double-edged sword. We've done our job right if no one notices us. So as a result, no one knows we really exist.
Right.
So without getting too deep into this topic, back then this is this thing of there's no legislation. Politicians or like, you know, doctors, psychologists don't even fathom into the fact that, oh, maybe there's this whole industry. Again, they not putting down anything, but just another huge factor into this. Well, it's still something that should be talked about. So
I like
there's so much discrimination. It's not just because you're a woman, because you're a person of color. I've had guys that I work with who we've discussed how they've been discriminated against because of their age. They were either too young or too old, or because of the way they looked. I worked with a monitor guy who told me how he one of the rock bands that he worked for when he first got the gig, because he was a big burly, looked like a biker, but he was a teddy bear of a guy. But just because he looked like a tough guy, the band gave him endless amounts of grief the first 2 weeks, because they finally came to us and said, dude, we're so sorry the way that we've been treating you. We just thought you were this big tough guy, and you had to prove something. And he's just like, I'm here to make you happy and do my job. And it's just was discriminated against because of his looks. So it's not just women in the business. It's kind of there's a broad area of discrimination in our business in so many other forms.
Laureen, did you have something that you wanted to say?
Well, I just wanted to jump on after Michelle, because it's ironic that she's talking about all this stuff, because I am 100% certain that we had this conversation like 10 years ago. Maybe it's like 7 now, but talking about discrimination in the industry. So I started when I was 16 years old. And the things that I've faced and witnessed are unbelievable. And as I get older, I kind of realize the things that happened to me when I was younger, how messed up they were. We talk about like sexual harassment and stuff like that and feeling trapped. I was like a 17-year-old girl setting up for a band. It's 2 a.m. We're loading the band, getting ready. I mean, I got like trapped against the wall with a drummer who decided to start making out with me. Like I was trapped by myself. So like I was 17. Like literally that's illegal. And there's so many other things. When I was introduced to Michelle, I was 7 years into the industry. I had never met another woman, had never even seen one. I was the unicorn, but in my part of the world in Pennsylvania, like they talk about, like I didn't face a lot of discrimination from the people that I actually worked with. Where I faced it were like local crews outside of Pennsylvania. Ironically, where I came up was in Pennsylvania, northeastern PA, and as I've traveled and toured around the world, I've realized how lucky I am to have, come up in the business where I did, where, my bosses treated me just like everybody else. Like I was a 16-year-old girl. I couldn't even lift up a speaker. I didn't know what a mic cable was, and they still hired me and gave me a shot next to everybody else. But when I was touring, and some of even the dudes that I worked with, when I wanted to break into touring, is kind of where I faced the discrimination initially. I had 2 men that I worked with for years, like literally were the men that taught me what I know. I was their stage tech. I did monitors with them. Like they worked at the same company for me. And I had 2 separate occasions from 2 separate men that I had worked with tell me that they wouldn't hire me because I was a woman. I could have jump started my touring career 5 years earlier than I did. And even more so than that, when I started touring, and I find that when I came into these positions, like when I got into front of house for Rusted Root, and particularly in the rock world, it's really competitive and mean. And that's where I really started to notice that people would really question my skills. Like there's a couple of houses in the United States that like, I know the in-house engineer is, I'm sorry, he's a dick. And there's a couple of them, and he sits there and questions me the entire time. Just this last year when I was with Lizzo, I had a man fully push me out of the way of my entire console and like put his hands on my mix because he thought he knew better than me, the person that gets paid how many thousands of dollars a week to do this professionally by the biggest touring artists, And so I faced a lot of that. And honestly, in the positive side of that, I've found that the men that I work with and the way that they treat the females on the crew directly translates to how other people treat the females on the crew. So like I toured with Michael Bolton. I had an incredible production manager. He didn't ever have to put his neck out for me, but he was always aware of what was going on the stage. And whenever I had even the seemingly like beginning of an issue with a crew, he would immediately be there. He'd be like, "Lo, you having a problem?" Be like, "I don't know, Coz." And he'd be like, "I'm sorry, this is Lorene. She's our monitor engineer. She's hired to do this job. You are going to do exactly what she says, because in the end, it's her show and she's responsible for whatever falls down. You guys don't have to see the show again. She does. So you got to do what she says." And then in the converse, you know, this last year I was with an artist where I didn't have a production manager who had his crews back, unfortunately. And a management organization who didn't care about the crew at all, which made the production manager and the tour manager's job so much more hard in protecting the crew. And because Lizzo wanted to be a more female-oriented, inclusive organization, you know, it was actually really difficult for me. You know, I didn't have anyone to have my back. Every step of my way, even with my own crew this year, I had to prove myself, prove my capabilities, prove that I was worthy of my job, prove that I can handle myself. Every single time I stepped into a venue, every single time that I even requested gear. The only reason I got through this year as healthily as I did is because I had a great relationship with Claire and Rob Bull. And that man saved my tush for most of the year. Wonderful support, wonderful belief, and it really showed me what's capable when you have men who hold each other accountable. That's really, you know, Michelle touched on it, and I would like to expand upon, you know, this isn't hard. It's not hard to change how you treat people in the industry. Anybody, you just give them a shot. Like, anybody here was a hungry young person. Like, I'm not sure why I understand why anybody is excluded from getting opportunities for color, their sex, for being transgender, for being queer, whatever. There is no need. We are all capable and human. So I need men to hold each other accountable for their actions. I need them, if they witness something on a stage, not just like stick up for the girl, but like hold the other men accountable, because in the end, like I can cry wolf all day. I can say, this man did this to me. This man did this to me. I might get fired. I might not get hired back. I'll become the troublemaker of the crew. I will get a reputation. I've been sexually harassed on a crew and been told that I was a whore. And I ended up leaving that crew because of it. But I had done nothing. And so men need to hold each other accountable. Like if I'm very clearly saying no, or there is somebody not treating me with respect, I almost can't do anything about it. Like I can face a man directly, and oftentimes I do, but that frequently is more like poking the ego. If someone is treating you that way and you engage him full on, most men will take that as a confrontation, and sometimes it doesn't end the way you want it to. It becomes a little more salty. So other men have to be like, hey dude, like that's not cool. You can't say that. Like that's not something you can say on a stage. Like it's easy as that. Like that's not cool to say to her. That's not cool to say at all. Like, and then also like just give people a shot. Like give them a shot. Like hire somebody. Like I can guarantee you that a woman, a man, if they're there and they're applying, a person of color, if they're applying, like they're gonna work, because they have to work harder to get farther. And that's the reality. Like I'm 14 years I've been doing this. I didn't start touring until I was like 7 or 8 years into it. And I talked to other men, like, you know, we talked about my friend Brandon Blackwell. He's been in audio for a total of 5 years. 5 years, and he is one of the top touring male engineers in the business. It took me 14 years to get to the same place. So yes, we can succeed, and yes, we can get there, but the way that it's functioning now, it's so much harder. And I definitely agree with Michelle. When she and Carrie were coming up, it's a different time and a different climate than it was here. Like when I reached out to Michelle, I was depressed, I was miserable, I hadn't seen another woman. She gave me hope, she gave me ways to deal with it. Like it's ironic that we're having this conversation and she's on the call with us right now for me, because it's such like a full circle moment. Like I literally just reached out to her like 2 weeks ago to be like, hey, how you doing? Haven't talked to you in a while. Thank you for helping change my whole career view, you know, because she definitely encouraged my thinking of like, you don't want to be like, I never wanted to be treated like a girl. I just want to be an engineer. Like, I just want to be an engineer. Like, I don't want you to be like, hey, you're a great female engineer. Remove that. I'm a great engineer. Why does it matter that I'm a woman? And it's still like that. Like still, oh, you're a great engineer for a female. And it's 2020. Like it's I got it this year. And in almost every conversation I have, like if I go on a discussion about gear or something for a manufacturer, almost inevitably, every single time they're like, what's your experience been like as a female? And that's cool, but like, you know, much like we're dealing with the racism and stuff like that, like educate yourself, guys. Like, you know what we're dealing with, you know what this industry looks like. It's so exclusionary. There's so little people of color, there's so little diversity in this business, and the people that do, they hold on to their, you know, onto their jobs. Like Fela, she has an incredible story of how she ended up to where she is now, you know, and it's because she would never let them stop her. She is an incredible force of nature who was always a great audio engineer and knew and had confidence in her skills, even though other people didn't. And I think that that's important to impart in all of us, and especially females. We're programmed to not like think that our opinions are right or matter. Like, we are gaslit in society. Be confident in yourself, be confident in your skills, and know that taking a chance on yourself is the most important thing that you can do for your success. Because even if you fail, you have still tried, which is more than anybody else can say, you know, on the same path that didn't even take the first step. So I don't know, that's my little tidbit.
Laureen, thank you so much. I got the little applause emoji. And kind of hard to follow up on that. That's just some deep stuff.
Laureen, do you feel like you've had issues? I know I have with when you do speak up and you're like, hey, that's a really fucked up thing that you just said. Like, why are you saying that at work? Have you ever gotten flack for that? Because I have. They're like, oh, well, it's, you know, it's the industry. It's how we talk. And I'm like, you're grosser than construction workers. Like, do we have to be nasty? Do we? Apparently, yes. So yes. You know, and I literally grew up with my parents. My dad lived on a sailboat. Like, I grew up as a sailor, basically. So the language doesn't bother me. It's just the crudeness. And for me, it was a lot worse when I started working in television. Those guys are literally as nasty as a guy hooting and hollering as you walk down the street. Like, that's my experience with them. So I don't.
You've been on a bus?
If you no, it was not for me. The tour bus was not. I learned early on in my career that I needed to have my own transportation and I needed control of my own like space, because of anxiety and stuff like that. So yeah, I after doing a few summer stocks where you share a room or an apartment with like 11 other people, I was good for that. But I don't know what to do when you do speak up for someone, or you do say like, hey, that's out of line for you to say, and then everyone kind of gangs up and is like, oh, it's just what we do, it's just how that person is. It's not, though. It doesn't have to be like that. And I don't know what is the appropriate response, because I've never gotten a positive reaction after I brought that up.
The reality is, in those situations, I've been in so many of them. I'll give you a couple of scenarios that I've been in. So when I came to California, I mean, I work for most of the major companies out here. I tech with all of them. And in one of the shops that I went into, I had some issues with the people in the shop disrespecting me, being like disgusting pretty much. Like I was literally in the shop. I was dating a sound guy. He was there with me, my boyfriend. I actually informed the company of our relationship so that if anything happened, you know, like, not that it, you know, but I wanted them to know if they put us on a gig, like it was okay. This person in the shop took offense that I was a straight white girl that wasn't paying him attention, and decided to start rumors about me in the shop. And I had previously been like, he had said something to me inappropriate while I was like building a rack. And I had been like, yo, like, you can't say that stuff to me. Like, I don't know who you've been talking to, but I'm not okay with this. And he turned around and started rumors about me within the company, and then turned around to my actual boyfriend and was like, hey, Laureen was like flirting with me and all this stuff. So it was like more petty than I had ever been. And I felt so uncomfortable going to the company and this is, you know, I've matured emotionally a little bit, but I also, when I came to California, I didn't have a lot of friends and I didn't have like a support system. And so I had posted on Sound Girls. I didn't name any names. I didn't like mention anything. But the owner of the company reached out to me and went, hey, is this my company? And I respect this person so much that I was like, yeah, it is. And fast forward, they instituted a harassment training in the thing. But now I have a disgusting reputation at the companies, particularly with the shop guys in Los Angeles. Like if I walk in the shop, all I get are like glares. No one really wants to talk to me, because they're all aware that I am the one that caused their training.
Well, it's not that you caused it, it's that they were disgusting, but they're not going to recognize that because they're assholes.
But I had women, a bunch of women who are familiar with the company reach out to me, and people that I highly respect and are mentors of my own, and they saw what happened and they've been like, hey, you need to expect not to get work from this company anymore. And that was the honest truth. Like my actual workload after that significantly decreased. I wasn't called for touring engineering positions anymore. And the irony is like there's still, you know, not a lot of women hired in their shop, and most women who go there, you know, particularly the straight ones, like we don't have anything nice to say. You know, the person that I'm talking about said to another queer friend of mine that he has problems with straight girls, like he can't work with straight girls. And he said this to a female who identifies as a lesbian, who's a very good friend and colleague of mine. And so, you know, it's still going on. You still have to deal with it. But for me, the reality is like, you as a person, you don't have to deal with that. And if you speak up and these people treat you that way, there is no amount of money that they could pay you to stay in a situation like that. Listen, there's more jobs. There are more opportunities. And someone is going to be out there that wants you for who you are and works in the same way that you need to be. It might be hard to find. And, you know, the industry is changing. But the reality is you don't have to take it. And that is something that I wish I knew when I was younger. And what Michelle had said, like, I didn't have to take it, and I don't now. And it's made me so much more powerful and effective in this business to understand that I can say no, and that I do know my worth, and that I do know that I'm good at my job. And then no matter what you say, I will succeed because I will find another opportunity, even if you don't want me. And if this is how you're going to treat me, then clearly you don't respect me. And I can't work for someone who doesn't respect me, including all of the people who have ganged up on me with this conversation. If you can't, it's kind of like our discussion that we're dealing with, you know, Black Lives Matter and all lives matter. You know, how tone deaf is it to say all lives matter when we, you know, we're focusing on a specific one. We're not saying that everything doesn't matter. We're saying that right now we need to focus on this thing. And so I feel like it's a very similar scenario. Like you don't have to take it. You can speak up. That is the whole purpose. We want to change this business, man. Like I fight so hard in my career to bring awareness and visibility and professionalism for women so that I can create opportunities for them. Like I never thought of my own success as like, oh, I want to be like I want to do this and this because of this. No, I want to create opportunities for the women coming after me. I want to allow the door to be more open. I want to get into a position of power, like production manager or, you know, a tour manager, not even a tour manager, like a production director where I make the hiring decisions, where I can reach out to women and hire them into these positions where I once got a shot. I would like to be allowed to give other women a shot. So you don't have to take it at all. You can go find another woman, get on Sound Girls, whatever. There are people that are more than willing to work with women, transgender people, Black folk, brown folk, whoever, you know, if you're purple, whatever. Like the world is changing. And if you can't find it, make it yourself.
Hey guys, if I could jump in, and I don't want to in any way lessen the impact of the discrimination faced by our sisters in the industry. And it's funny because for years I've actually been in a hiring position where I try to actually some of my best day-twos and techs have been women. And I've had a fantastic time, and we've obviously been very outspoken. But sometimes when we talk about this issue of discrimination and lack of diversity, there's something that I have to live with that a lot of people don't recognize because it's not very overt. It's a lot of microaggression. So people ask me all the time, how come I stay in reggae music? And the truth of the matter is I choose to stay in reggae music because I started climbing the pop ladder and I just disliked it so much that I went back to work in reggae because being born and raised in Jamaica, it's just more of an enjoyable time for me, and it's more of a family atmosphere touring with reggae acts rather than trying to, I guess, climb the large touring ladder. And the reason for that is that we constantly face microaggressions being from what people consider a quote unquote third world country, when in fact, a lot of our engineers that come out of the Caribbean and other developing countries are way more skilled than a lot of North Americans. And so we face this, it's interesting because we face this discrimination from all factions, women, men, trans people. It's for us, it's a very difficult thing because we cannot get away from it. I've had an owner of a company say to me that you people don't understand how to fly a line array. When we've had line array, and we bought the first JBL rig, Vertec rig that was out on a beta test, came to Jamaica first off of Janet Jackson tour. So I've had to deal with this sort of discrimination from artists constantly throughout my career. Constantly, I have to deal with it today, even today, advancing shows for the acts that I work for. I have to deal with it all the time, and it comes from everybody. It doesn't only come from one group of people. It comes from everybody. So here's the thing. I always mention that the fact of the matter is discrimination continues because silence is complicit, right? So as it relates to the discrimination that our sisters face, those people who know me and follow me, Liam and the guys that invited me to come on this, know that I am very outspoken. And being Jamaican, that outspokenness is not pleasant. When I speak up in defense of somebody, it's not going to be pleasant. You're definitely going to remember it, and you'll definitely not do it around me ever again, because it's going to be serious. But in order for us to defeat discrimination in every aspect of how it's portrayed in society, it's going to take this constant, we can't become wary in speaking up. We can't become wary of in defending what's right. And God knows sometimes it's tiring, because we as Caribbean engineers, I walk around with a chip on my shoulder. Every show, I am going to prove to you that I will mix you under the fucking table. And honestly, if you can't handle that, lock off your console and go find something else to do. Because it's funny. So I was invited to, some of you might be familiar with Coffee. I mean, she's blowing up right now. She was opening for Daniel Caesar. And they invited me to, I happened to be home in Toronto. They were playing 2 sold out shows at the Budweiser stage. And they asked me to come in and mix 2 shows. And immediately, when I started advancing what I needed, I get this, you can sense it too, right? Like you sense this microaggression of, man, you Jamaican guys always cause trouble, or reggae people come late, and there's stereotypes of, you guys don't really know what you're doing anyway, so why do you need to have specific gear? Like, you can just use this because, I mean, and it's only until now, it's only until a few weeks ago when big manufacturers like Digico and DPA and all these manufacturers, great people that have taken me on, and we've had so many conversations surrounding this. Myself and Jerry Harvey had a lengthy conversation at NAM regarding the fight that we get and the discrimination that we face being from the Caribbean, and how we can start to change those things. And it's only now when people see me doing stuff for Digico, or they see me doing stuff for DPA, that some of the same people who I've faced these microaggressions from are coming back to say, well, man, listen, we apologize. And I guess part of that has to do with the climate. Somebody referred to the climate in society right now and how a lot of these conversations are happening. But like, for example, I have a Quantum 338 in my house right now, like just in my basement, that I've been given to for whatever I want to do for a few months, right? And it's not until people are seeing that, because I'm very active on social media, that some of these same people that have been aggressive towards me and discriminatory towards me in the past have come back to either apologize or sometimes pride prevents them from apologizing, so they take sort of this roundabout, try to make friends now that we've like I've somehow magically forgotten. So I say all that to say that as we deal with this conversation and we start to tackle that issue, like Lorene and like some of the other ladies who are incredibly successful, and let's be honest, have had to work twice as hard as male counterparts to get to where they've got to. We can't become weary in that fight, because trust me, it's constant. Like it's for me, like it's constant. We've been on tours where I've had issues. Had issues from local crew chiefs. Like it's constant. Like it's just this, and it gets really tiring. Like it at some point, like now in some areas I walk into venues and people say, "Oh, you're the angry Jamaican guy," because I've had to become that dude, because I just won't take it, and I won't let you disrespect my artist, and I won't let you disrespect my crew, and I won't let you disrespect my musicians, because this is life. I'm just out here trying to earn bread just like anybody else. You know what I'm saying? So I personally, I feel like our world especially lacks empathy, and until we can walk a mile in someone else's shoes and understand what they go through from a day-to-day basis. And you know what's funny for me is that, especially on the reggae side, there is no other genre of music that tours the entire world as consistently as reggae music. And I'll challenge anybody on that. The reason is we don't tour album cycles. Reggae is we're constantly working every corner of the globe. So it's funny that we face these discriminations and microaggressions. So I feel that when I hear Lorene talking, like it stirs up these emotions of anger in me, because honestly, like until everybody gets on that train of speaking up against it and standing against this shit, I, for one, am going to be walking around with that chip on my shoulder, because it's going to be, listen, I've got something to prove, and I'm going to prove it in such a vocal and visible way that you are never going to forget it. And once you leave that conversation, now, listen, we can have arguments on whether or not this is the right approach. This is just me speaking from the heart in a conversation. I came on this because I felt, you know what, this is a safe space. I felt good about it. So, and I would encourage everybody to do that. Like, yo, this shit has to stop. Like, we got to treat people equally based on their skill set, not based on who they are, how they look, or what they have between their legs. Shit, man. Like, if you can mix a show, you can mix a fucking show. Like, and that's I think where we need to, but we can't be weary in that fight. Like, I know we're saying why we've been having this conversation so long, and trust me, I feel that way sometimes. But we got to keep fighting this shit. We got to keep standing against it and being very vocal about how we feel on these issues. And then I encourage the men on this call and everybody, just I don't care how people respond. Speak about it and speak loudly and clearly, because that's the only way it's going to change.
I like to hop in on that, Jason, because I got my start in Miami with reggae engineers, which you may know my mentor, Courtney Taylor.
Courtney Taylor.
Yeah. Like, and you're right. Like, you guys don't get nearly West Indian mixers are like, that's kung fu that you guys do with any equipment you guys are on. You guys make any system sound next level. So just seeing what you guys can do with nothing. And then when you do have is digicodes and all the next level stuff, like it's over with. But yeah, I see that. And just with him, even him kind of going the pop way and stuff. But you know, he took me in early, Courtney, when I was in Florida, and this young engineer, and you know, just giving me the comfort to actually fail, or not like, oh no, you want to do it this way, or not browbeating me every time I messed up or something. So yeah, so thank you to that community, that reggae community, man. You guys are on another level, and you killed the hip hop game So you guys scooted over to that from the reggae to hip hop, but I'm with Lorene as well. You just have to leave a situation. I'm the biggest proponent of that. When you feel like, oh, you don't believe that I'm not doing the right thing, I leave that situation. And then I get with people who do hold me up. Like, thank goodness for Michelle and Carrie for creating Sound Girls, because that's lit up my career. Just other ladies talking about gigs and giving each other gigs. We have friends now too. So I'm like, grow your friends. Like, let's, you're always gonna have that house guy that's been there 15 years. Who wants to be a house guy that's been at a place for 20 years? I'm sorry, that was never my goal when I got into mixing. It was like, I wanted to see the world. I wanted to be on the biggest and best consoles. I wanted to be on the best systems. That was my thought process when I got into this game. And if you weren't helping me to get to that game, you were done. Okay, you didn't like how I did. Okay, boom, I'm not going to do that anymore. But I've worked at the Claire's, and I've gotten to work at some of the biggest places in the world, and learned how they do their thing, and that's cool. It wasn't for me on a forever basis, but you learn what you can where you're at, and you move on. And that's whether you're a man, woman, whatever. It's like you have to know exactly in your head where you want to take this career. And if it's not falling in that, and whoever you're working with, move on. And then you just don't have that problem. It's just like, if you're not uplifting me, or if I'm not uplifting you, we shouldn't even be dealing with each other. And the more you find your tribe and people that are building up and that believe in you, that's how this all grows. You find your Sound Girls community that, I've gotten gigs to mix live Atlantic record label shows all around the city. I ended up being able to mix for Live Nation venues because of Sound Girls, because of this network. Create your network and all of this goes away. You get to do your own thing. I'm never stressed now because I only deal with people that want to see me win. If you don't want to see me win, okay, boom. I don't have to mess with you. But I got people all around the world that want to see me win. So I want to see them win. So I'm supporting them. So all the other stuff, that's just noise. That's just noise. I want to hear the music. Fuck the noise. I want to hear the music. So that's my thought process.
Yes, facts. Wait, Fela, before, I would love for you to mention some of your, origin story, like a superhero. Like, you've told it to me before, and you have an incredible story, and it does have some discrimination.
Oh,
yeah, this sounds like fun. I want to hear this.
Oh, well, yeah, it's always going to be, you're going to have your situations, your house guy that's an asshole. I just never took no. I always, it took me years to get in at Claire, but then I got that crack in the door. There was a brother who was over the crew, over the warehouse in New York, and I got my foot in the door. And then there, I got my hands on every console and every microphone you can name because it's Claire. So I would do my $10 an hour job for them. But then I would also take the microphones to my $50 a night gigs. And that was how I learned everything. I would take Avalons to $50 a night gigs. But my manager was fine with it. He was like, well, you ain't getting paid nothing. So at least learn how to gear run. So that initially made me realize, oh, I need to buy microphones. And it was like a incremental thing. Like, okay, now I bought microphones. Then I ended up starting a live recording business with a business partner. And that was how, and then Sound Girls had started. And then we got gigs from friends through Sound Girls at Atlantic Records and just building up in New York City, but building up with other people that wanted to see me win. I really don't care about people that don't want to see me win. I don't even want to have a conversation about it. Like, if you want to play, you know, keyboard hero, but you're only doing, you know, side church gigs and you're not doing major tours, I don't want to hear your opinion because it doesn't matter to me. And then in between that, I was building up my situation on LinkedIn. So I started posting my live recordings and stuff like that on LinkedIn. And then Christian McBride hit me up through LinkedIn. So it wasn't even having to go through a friend of a friend, hook me up with a gig. I don't get gigs from friends like that. That's not many women do. A lot of the guys can do that. That's a major way that guys get gigs. But for women, I knew I had to finesse something else. And so I was like, oh, no guy is on LinkedIn. So I'm going to do what the guys aren't going to do. And I'm going to start posting the proof that I can mix, that I can record, that I can do all of this. And then I ended up doing HD, 92K recordings for Christian McBride, who is also a 6-time Grammy Award winner, who is looking for what I was doing. So, I mean, because nobody else in New York City, how many engineers must be in this town? And I still ended up at #1 because I put the most stuff on my LinkedIn page, pictures, video. And people didn't realize on analytics, it picks you at the top. So whoever was looking for an engineer, they were going to see me. I made it so that you were going to see me. So therefore, you have to take the lead yourself. You really have to look in the mirror. It's you. Do not put this out here and get rid of the noise. Get rid of the noise, get the music, and think about you. How can you make your world better? I really can't think about anybody else and how they're going to help me and da-da-da-da, because that's not going to really happen unless they want to do that. So, you know, that was pretty much how I got into the game without the normal way. I just used the internet.
Yeah, I feel like too, if Phil, you know, like walking around with that chip is like, I want people to know how extremely gratifying that is.
Yeah,
when you prove that, like, honestly, we have that saying when we have conference calls with our crews all the time. We actually, when I first met Bull, actually from Claire, shout out to Bull because he's a huge part of what we do with the Marley Brothers. I tell people, I say, listen, we don't do this for money. We do this for legacy, because we're in a point in our careers right now where and I know the women on this call can identify with that. You're in a point where we got something to prove to make this better for the next generation. The next group of Caribbean engineers that come after the Courtney Taylors, the Veer Danny Rams, the Dean Pons, the Jason Reynolds, the Steve Truckback, the next generation that comes after us should not have the same struggles that we've had. So for us, we take that serious. Like, we take that mission. This ain't about faders and knobs. It's more than that for me. Every time I step behind a console, I put my artists out on that stage. It's more than faders and knobs. This is about leaving a lasting impact, and we think about these things constantly. So I always, when I have friends of mine who reach out to me, because I do, and especially, again, given the climate of what's going on in the world, I've had a lot of people reach out to me in the past few weeks and months to say, listen, man, how can I be a part of this change? How can I help? That's the first thing I tell them. I say, listen, this is why we do this. We do this to prove a point so that the kids coming after us don't have to do that. And so that's why it's important that, like you said, to I want to work with people who want to see me win. I for example, the PAs I put on my rider, Adamson is my first choice on my rider. You know why? Because Brock Adamson himself reached out to me and said, we want to help you win. How can we be a part of that? I couldn't give a crap if you never get me to use another in-ear monitor because of conversations I've had with Jerry Harvey on this particular subject. Is how can we help you break that mold, that stereotype? How can we help you get further? And I encourage all y'all to have those conversations, because you can't pay me to use a product. You can't pay me to use anything, but you can. When I have these conversations, I have these conversations with the freaking grocery store where I buy my groceries. I want to know how they feel about racial equality and justice in our country before I spend a cent in their store. And so when it comes to production companies, when it comes to, I'd rather go with a small company who don't have that much gear, but they're in this fight with me. They're with me. They want to see me win. They want to see my artists win. They want to see us move forward together, and we're going to fight together, and we're going to stand against injustice together. That matters to me. So even if I have to put up with some growing pains because you're not a global company and I'm stuck in Austria and I need something and you can't get it to me till a week from now, I'll put up with that, because those things are more important to me because of why I'm doing this.
I agree with this. And you said that you use Claire, right?
Yep.
I use Claire for the same reason. Like, they're one of the only companies now that I've had the year I've had that I will work with, because it was a nightmare. Like, I was having a horrible year of disrespect, and I reached out to them like, hey guys, what's going on? And they were like, we got you. Like, whatever it is you need, we got you. Like, I'm at a festival and they're in Nashville and they're remotely coordinating frequencies for me because they didn't have anybody. Like, I've never had that level of support. And they're like, we want to help you succeed. So I completely understand. And you know what? They're out there. Those businesses are out there. Sometimes like you said, sometimes you have to reach out to them and start the conversation. But like, yeah, it's important work. If it's something you feel called to. Not all of us are called to speak out in the ways that like some of us are, not all of us speak out in the same ways. Don't feel that pressure, but like, man, that is such an amazing point, Jason. Like, yeah.
I felt as an educator, you have to speak out, because like Claire has been awesome to my students. I know a lot of my students have gotten jobs there, women, men, whatever, and they're all young, so they're learning. So I think it's pretty cool that they give them the chance pretty often. And Full Sail has a mixed reputation. So it's cool that they give them a chance. But I feel when you are in a position that you can speak out, like we have our Sound Girls podcast, Becky and I have been working on that. We have an outlet. I have a blog. We have these ways that we can communicate and put our information out there. And so I kind of feel that responsibility that I have to. I'm in a position where as long as I don't say really horrible things about my employer, I'm pretty much good to speak out on however I want to, because they've been really supportive of that. So that's my position. I feel like I have to share these things. I have to work toward, the privilege that I have to work toward helping everybody else and being that mentor for other people. I'm lucky to have that position, honestly.
It's interesting you speak about people speaking up. You speak about people speaking up. And I completely get where people are coming from when they talk about leaving a company that doesn't support you, and you can find other companies to work for. Does anyone know what's happened to any of these companies that they may have left? Does anyone, is there a danger that anyone that leaves these companies, are these companies being left behind to just be an echo chamber for the people that were there, that were causing trouble in the first place? Are they an echo chamber that's still surviving no matter how many people leave? Or does anyone know of any of these companies that have struggled to hold on to employees so much that they've actually started to dwindle in how much business they're doing, or have had to shut down? Laurie?
I did. There's a theater that I work for out here. I won't name it on the podcast, but there's a theater out here that I previously worked for. When I first moved to California, a very good friend of mine took over technical directing the theater. Like, he took over all the operations. The actual theater fired the entire production team and got rid of everybody. And I helped him clean out this theater. And I found swastikas. I found all of this racial insanity. I found disgusting and disparaging cartoons about women and things, all in this theater. And then I found out the history of the people working there. So it was like literally a house for like the people you're talking about to go and cause misery. And they had a horrible reputation. They weren't doing music in this theater. Like no one would even come through. And then they fired all those people and hired in my friend. And then about a year later, they actually fired my friend because he found that the other side, so there's like two sides, there's like an event side and a concert side. The event side was embezzling money from the concert side, and he found it in their books, and he got fired. Because not only did he find that, but he was also raising the fact that they had started like censoring his hiring. And so he was only allowed to hire like certain amounts of people and stuff. And now, mind you, he's a small Jewish man who's faced a lot of discrimination in his audio career. He's worked with a lot of people. He's very well respected. And I have never experienced it. And it's a women's club. Like it's literally a women's club that runs this whole place. And they are literally still an institution where like now it's a white ponytail guy running the theater again. It's all the same people that they fired got hired back in, and they've totally killed all of the concerts in the venue. So now the only thing working at the venue is the event side, like weddings and things like that. So those echo chambers exist, but I think people are getting less and less willing to work in them.
Yeah, I have a story on that too. So the same owner of the production company that made that comment to me about you people not knowing anything about linery, they've had techs move on from there and go on to do great things. A lot of them are, one of the techs I can think of right off the top of my head is one of the top system techs with Solo Tech, and was out with Five Finger Death Punch, and they've had guys move on to do like really great things, but they've kind of got stuck in the 80s, if you will. So I always say this, you know, you may not be able to change the entire world, but you can definitely have impact on your sphere of influence. So I think it's funny because the Canadian distributor for Digico asked me to. I do a lot of their training and especially on Clang stuff. For those who follow me know I was one of the first Clang users on tour. So I do a lot of Clang. I just did a webinar for Clang. And this same company just purchased, before COVID had planned to purchase 2 338s, and Gear Audio, who's the Canadian distributor, was sending me there to do the training. And it's kind of funny when you see the look on people's faces when you walk in to do Digico training, and it's the same guy who you told that he doesn't know anything because of where he's from. It's hilarious. But that's kind of why I said, you know, it's gratifying that when you prove it, when you go out there and you prove it, and for me, I make it obvious. I don't care. People call it cocky, whatever. If you put me down in the past and I've got to where I got to through hard work, when I come back across, when we cross paths again, I'm gonna let you know. That's just my personality. I probably would have done well in sports because I'm a trash talker. But a lot of these companies will get stuck in the past, and you know what? If they don't, that's not my battle to fight. It's more so that I'm committed to affecting my immediate sphere of influence, because that's where I have influence on the people around me, and I can speak regarding that. But I do agree with the point made before that I think we do have a responsibility to you know, I know Larini said, you know, some of us have, we do have different personalities, but sometimes we got to break out beyond that, because when we're put in positions of influence, it comes with that responsibility to say something, to do something, to represent change, right? And I think that's where we have to develop that kind of resolve, that, you know, sometimes even if it's out of character, the situation might call for us being that person in that space to take that step, because if we don't, it may never get done, right? So it's kind of like that vibe of if not me, then who, right? So, but yeah, as it relates, man, I can't spend my time worrying about these companies who are gonna support that kind of foolishness, because ultimately, eventually, they're gonna get left behind anyway, right? So I think I just kind of focus on what I can control and what I can have impact and effect on, right?
Yeah, because those sour techs are going to stay there because nobody else is going to hire them. So
Exactly.
those guys always stay at one job forever.
He's just gonna be he's a junkyard, of crappy techs. So whatever.
Yeah.
Everybody knows about them. Like that's the thing. Like everybody knows about them. There's like everybody knows. Like we all know. We can all walk into a gig and be like, oh, it's this company. Oh yeah, it's gonna be that day. Or like we all know. They all have a reputation at some point. That's the funny thing about our business. It's simultaneously huge and tiny at the same time.
Right.
And we really love to gossip. Gotta tell you.
Yeah. And the truth of the matter is, I tell students that I mentor and when I teach, I tell them, listen, it's only 10%. Why you get hired, faders and knobs is only 10% of why you get hired. And to be honest, your talent around the console only gets you to the gig. It doesn't let you keep it. It's not going to keep you there. It's only it in some cases will only get you there. So let's be honest. If you're an asshole and if you're an idiot, you might get the gig, but you're not going to stay there very long. We live in a where I'm optimistic. I'm hopeful. I see things now. I mean, I'm not very old, but I see things happening in our world now that we've never seen. People who are older than me are saying we've never seen this kind of real conversation and openness from both sides as it relates to the racial divide. So we're seeing change, and we have to I just believe that it's going to change. And so, these people who hang on to that kind of behavior, they're going to be extinct, if not in my lifetime, in the next. So they can continue to do that shit. That's their choice.
I think, like, the biggest, to build on everything that's been said, is the biggest thing you can do is to just go into your job doing the best job that you can. And we also teach people how to treat us. So if we have respect for ourselves and we hold our ground, like, I'm here because this is my gig and I deserve to be here, people, whether they're comfortable with that or not, are going to recognize that. And you're always going to have those pockets of people who are just assholes, who just, are toxic, and they find each other and they will stay with each other. But by what you're saying, when you get to the level where you have a choice in who you give your business to and who you hire, that's how you can speak towards, look, your company is a bunch of toxic whatever, I'm not giving you my business. And that's one way to progress. But also by everyone, when you have to kind of pick your battles, because you always find what you're looking for. I'm a firm believer of that. If you want to find something, you're going to find it. So how much of your day do you want to spend, trying to convince every idiot of every stupid thing that they say is wrong? You just kind of, sometimes you have to put your head down, do your job, and just pick the bigger battles where you actually, we can't change a lot of people's minds. You might be able to change someone's, but you're never going to change everybody's. So that's where it takes other people standing up and coming forward and saying, hey, dude, like, that really wasn't cool. And people being more in solidarity to support each other in what's okay and what's not acceptable. And, like I said, just go in, do your job. Like Fela said, you got to block out a lot of the noise, because there's noise everywhere around us. And it's not just our industry, it's just in the world in general. But when you can make choices on who you hire or someone, is a good point. It's like someone's asking you for a recommendation. Try not to just give them, one. Try and find, 3 different people from 3 different backgrounds, whether 3 different races, genders, whatever, which goes a long way in helping progress diversity in this industry.
Absolutely, I agree.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Which, Michelle, that also brings up a point too, is like, I'm not this everyone's story. Thank you again for sharing it. And I think we can continue if you want to tell more, but this is a great jumping off point of where do we go from here is like, there's the obviously things like mentorship, but it's like, Michelle, is like you said, like I've been in scenarios where I've been, whether it be in not volunteer or in paid positions, where I've had the option to hire people or bring them on, and I've tried my darndest. I'm not trying to say, hey, look at me, what I'm doing, but just in the scenarios, like try to bring in more people, so it's not just, you know, a white bro club, but it's like there's also, at least in my experiences, there's also that challenge of like, yes, I would love to have these 3 different people from these 3 different backgrounds, but in this subfield is like trying to find them. And yes, and Sound Girls has been very helpful, but then there are some situations where even with great sources like that, you're like, you know, I'm having trouble trying to say it, because it's like, it's a frustration that I'm frustrated that I can't find more in that. And that's one of the topics that Leah and I kind of want to talk about, is like, to give a perfect example of what I'm also more of a real world. Someone could say I am totally wrong on this, but at least in my experience, whenever I've seen a rock and roll group come through, I've only seen guys be on that crew. Now, obviously, yes, people like Lauren, Michelle, and all the other people, it's awesome, but it's like, it's still the majority is if it's a rock band or a metal band, I'm going to see a white dude with a ponytail like me come through that door. And it's even the percentage will shrink even more when we start going into metal. But it's like that. But then what I mean to then shift over to, like, let's say R&B, rap, EDM, I can't speak to, but more that seems to be a little bit more, from my experience, seems to have a little bit more diversity. So
I think it's a thing, honestly. Like rock and metal music are very much like, when I was in the rock and metal world, it was very competitive. But I gotta tell you, when I did Warped Tour and I was out there doing front house, the metal people were some of the nicest, kindest people I've ever met, and would honestly very much support a woman on their crew. It's just a matter of having access to a woman who like really wants to mix that style of music. Like the only woman that I know out there is Jenny Douglas. She's a punk rock front house chick. You know, I was out there for a couple of years, not my vibe. It was awesome experience. But I definitely believe if you want to find those people, you have to go to the people that you want to find, right? So yeah, Sound Girls is an excellent source, but Sound Girls doesn't know anything. Like if you want to find, you know, some women of color that do sound, I would reach out to one of the women of color, like Fela Davis, be like, hey, you know, I'm looking for some people to accomplish this role. I'd like it to be a diverse, you know, crew. Can you recommend some people? Or like find an area, like if you're looking in a certain area, if you want to find a thing, you know, there's a lot of diversity. It's just hard to find. It's hard to get a recommendation because so much of our business is word of mouth, and often people like don't advertise themselves because yes, we're technicians, but we're not like computer people. That's not our vibe. Like Amanda Davis, she's a fantastic front of house engineer, woman of color, worked with Janelle Monáe, Ella May this last year. She's incredible. She's wonderful. She's kind. She's amazing. And you almost see her nowhere. Like I have been like really pushing her in my webinars and recommending her and stuff because she's incredible. She's like an opera singer. She's incredibly accomplished, but she doesn't advertise herself that way. So it's hard to find people. So I find that by going, like, you know, you can come to someone like me or Michelle or anybody on this chat and be like, hey, like I want to fill this position. I would like it, you know, someone that's not a regular white guy, you know, do you have any recommendations? And they could give you some of their friends. And if they don't work, then some of those people can make recommendations. But the networks are a little bit different to me when you're dealing with like R&B and things like that versus like pop and rock. You know, Jason definitely talked about it, you know, the pop ladder. And he was right. Like I was on the pop ladder this year and I wasn't human to them, you know, like it's different. So it's definitely the networks and the higher you go in each genre of the network, you're going to find less and less of whatever specific type you're looking for. Like some of the, you know, Jason's a reggae guy, but I've met other guys touring with reggae acts who've been like, I've been doing this for 30 years and I'm a white guy. I mix all of the reggae acts, you know what I mean? There's one guy in particular, you probably know him, who I remember, he'd be like, yeah, like, it's all white guys, and now that's changing. So I feel like the actual genres are changing, and I do feel like women are much more accepted in the R&B and rap and worlds like that, because particularly, I might be a white girl, but I'm still a girl, and I feel like in Black culture that they call their women queens, and they treat their women with a certain sense of respect, and even though I'm not part of their culture, like that still carries over to me a little bit. Like I've been treated so respectfully by reggae acts and rap acts and things like that. Now, every now and then you have like a flow rider who's like a dick, but they've been nothing but kind. The most discrimination I faced is from rock crews, and not metal, rock. When I was in the rock touring world is where it was the worst for me. And I don't know if it's changed now, but a lot of the ponytails that we talk about are hanger-ons from like the 80s and stuff like that. And I haven't obviously been in the rock world for a couple of years. Not in like the mainstream rock world, like Shinedown and those guys. So I have no idea how they stand. I was even touring with Rusted Roots. So you're talking about touring with reggae bands. We were on tour with the Wailers for like the whole first year I was touring with Rusted Roots. So, I haven't.
My experience in the rock world has been the opposite. I've been treated great by my rock guys. But I want to say, like, the problem I think is, it's not really a problem, but what's happening is this business is such a small business, and it's all in who you know. So it's a matter, you've got to take it upon yourself to reach out and build your contacts. You can't just, oh, I did this tour, now I'm going to sit and wait for someone to call me. It's all a matter of getting to know people. And what happens is you get the tour manager and production managers start building a crew through the years of people that they know and trust. And they're the people that they're going to hire. And why wouldn't they? Because they know them, they trust them, they know the job that they're going to do. And they rarely take a chance on someone outside of their network unless they know that person, or they know someone who gives them a great recommendation, because the jobs are so, in touring, there's no substitute. If you fuck up and there's no one there to take over your job, and if you're not good, it's your responsibility to mix the show. And someone vouched for you and you do a shit job, well, not only you go down, so do they. So it's very hard to break into a network. So the best thing you can do is, again, by getting to know these people, whether it's on festivals or you're working a local venue when they come through and they get to know your work, because it's very difficult for people to take a chance on recommending someone that they haven't worked with or that they can't vouch for their work. And I think it was like Jason said, it's only so much of it is your skill. It's also personalities. Like, you've got to live with a group of people on tour. I've known people who've been great at their jobs have gotten fired because they were just complete dicks. And I've known people who were horrible at their jobs who are so much fun to be around that they've never had a day without work in 20 years because everyone loves working with them. So it's not just as much of like, no one wants to hire women, no one wants to hire people of color. We have to take it upon ourselves to break into those networks and get to know those people and let them know that we're here. I mean, when I'm on a tour and I know it's ending, I'm reaching out to every single person on my network constantly. I'm like, hey, I'm going to be home on October, available. I don't just sit home waiting for the phone to ring. I mean, I've been doing this. I've been touring for almost 30 years, and I've mixed all A-level, artists, and I still don't just sit home and wait for the phone to ring. You've got to put yourself out there, and it's a matter of like I said, these networks are small, and rightly so, because you have to build a network and a group of people you trust around you. So production managers, tour managers, they're going to go immediately with who they know first before they take a chance on someone else.
Awesome. So I just realized, like, as we were having this talk, I'm like, Laura, you might be able to speak more because of, at least if I remember your experience, you do tour with more of the metal bands in Europe. So maybe can you kind of speak to your experience on that?
Yeah, I do. I do tour the world, mostly with European bands, but American bands every now and then as well. But they're always like the bigger B-list bands, never A-list. I find, at least in Europe, the environment to be fairly open to diversity, to women more than to people of color. Back when I started in 2002, it took me about a year until I saw the first girl on tour. Now on a tour of 12 people, you can see up to 4 women, which is still not 50-50, but 4 out of 12 is a pretty good score in my book. I myself am transgender. I am literally walking a mile in any of your shoes right now. It is horrible to realize the amount of BS that you're dealing with on a daily basis. I came from the best possible position, white male privilege. I sort of had a ponytail, but I never acted like a ponytail. I worked like 250 shows a year because I couldn't do more, because I needed more clones of myself. Literally, people came flocking to me like, dude, I want you to work for them as well. And I'd literally be doing 4 or 5 bands at the same festival, skipping food just because, I was there anyway. I came out as transgender and I started saying, hey, I'm transgender, just playing with my cards open on the table because that's just how I roll. It was exactly the same as lighting my resume and all my skills and everything on fire. Like, I am worth nothing right now. I've worked hard over the last year to try and get there. My main bands are actually in the studio, and they have been since 2016. So it was looking for other bands. Anyone I'd ask. Before it was, if I even lifted my finger, I'm available. 5 minutes, job done. Now I'll be asking for 5 weeks. Hey, you're still looking, right? I'm still available for every single one of your shows, and my resume is not too poorly, right? Yeah. No, we're still looking, and it's so frustrating to see that, and especially despite what Lorene and Michelle said, that the rock and metal world can actually be really cool, it also cannot. I notice pretty much like the 80s ponytail kind of attitude that we've been talking about, the locker room, no one holds anyone accountable for the BS they're spouting. I've noticed that when I say, hey, I'm transgender, you can hear their gears clicking in their head like, oh, so you're a woman now, but what's between your legs? And if I actually like you as a woman, does it make me gay? You know what? I'm actually not going to hire you. Yeah, I know your resume is good, but no, don't want the drama. It's... Yeah, go.
No, I just want to jump onto this. I want to jump onto your point because I've actually witnessed this firsthand this last year. So I did a thing with Sound Girls. I don't know if any of you caught it, but I actually, to our fall tour, I brought out young women to like shadow me to every single show, pretty much in our fall tour. And one of the women that came, ironically, her name was Laura, and she was transgendered.
It's a popular transgender name.
Yes. And she was the best sound tech that I had the entire tour. She roasted everybody, absolutely roasted every single tech that I had. And she told me her story, and it was so similar to yours. Like, she had been a he, had a very successful career, was very well known, came out as transgendered, and then everything went away. And the venue that she was in when I met her, that she came to with was living in, they actually let her work there too. And that was the first venue in like a year that she had been allowed to work in. And had my tour manager approved it, I actually would have brought her out to fill in for me for that tour because she was so incredible. But we keep in touch now and then, and she still tells me of what she's been facing in this business. And yeah, I'm a woman and I get discrimination, but there's a different level of discrimination for transgendered people, particularly when you're dealing with males. It like challenges their ego, and it makes me want to help people so much more. Like, everything I do is to help people succeed. Like, I really want to help people get ahead and be better in this business, and like more accepting. And honestly, much like a woman or someone who's getting a shot, like, you're gonna work you're gonna work 10 times as hard. You like, you know, you have something to prove, like, and that's unfortunate, but I'm so sorry. And I know it's changing, because people like all of the people on this call, you know, are the people that are gonna be reaching out and wanting to hire someone like you. You know, we're out there.
I should hope. Yeah.
You know, but we're out there. It's just that it's still unpopular for a lot of people. And you're right, in Europe, there were so many more women in Europe. Oh my God, I had so many female sound techs in Europe. I didn't have any over here in America. That was a wake up call for me. That was weird.
Yeah, I've done tours with front of house and monitors, both being done by women, and well, as I might say. So it's it is happen. It's sort of like a happy place in Europe, so that's good. And sometimes I wish, damn, I wish I'd done lights or sound, because then I could have a light or PA company back me up. And like Jason and you and Suzanne were also telling about, these companies want you to win. Like, who am I going to call? Like all of the guitar amp companies, like, hey, I'd like to represent your, oh no, wait, the band doesn't like your gear. No, it doesn't work. So sometimes I wish I could, but I'll just do it on my own. And I'm trying to share my story, be authentic, and be a lightning rod for the community, so that those who come after me don't have to fight the same fights that I needed to do. And I'm sure the same goes for Michelle, Lorene, Kim, and Suzanne, and Vela. We're trying to make it better, maybe for us, but mostly for those who are there tomorrow. And if that makes me a lightning rod, so be it. I've experienced the same thing in sport. I happen to be a world champion in a sport that no one knows, in an insignificant division, but I received so much flack for it from all of the ponytails and keyboard warriors in the world. And it hurts me, but I'll not let it get to me. I'll just be there and try to be strong. And I don't know, maybe it's because of COVID, but in the last few months I've been invited for interviews, for webinars like this. Like, hey Laura, your story, it needs to be told. Please tell it. And I
Laura,
try
are you a member of soundgirls.org?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
And Carrie actually interviewed me last year about transitioning in the industry.
Yeah, because there's definitely a lot of members who could benefit from your story.
Yeah.
Some people, because of my interview, reached out to me like, hey, I'm actually about to transition, but how should I go about it? How can I deal with this in the industry? Because we're all in this in this locker room, and maybe that's the thing I would like to stress as trying to make it better for all of us tomorrow. We need to get rid of this whole locker room thing. Any other industry we'd be in, we'd be so fired and sued every single day for so many times. But somehow in this industry, you can just get away with harassment, sexual harassment, verbal abuse, physical abuse, discrimination, racism. It all happens because, the show must go on. But the show must go on doesn't mean you just need to wear blinders and carry on regardless. You actually need to hold each other accountable. Men holding men accountable, women holding women accountable, everybody holding everybody accountable. Because you as a team on tour, you can be the best, you can be the worst, you can be the nicest, you can be the rudest, but the weakest link is going to bring down the whole ship. If you don't look after that weakest link, especially if it's not their fault, but just by their heritage or by their gender identity or whatever, look out for the weakest link. Make sure they become the strongest link by making them want to win. like Jason said it, Lorene said it, like we need to make each other try to win and be winners for each other, so we can all be winners. That's what we really need to do as an industry. And maybe now, because we're all in lockdown, we can actually hit this reset button so damn hard and try to get a new fresh start in the proper way, the way it was always supposed to be. And now we have this chance. Amen.
Amen. I just want to hop on at this point, what she's saying. So I would like to say that during COVID now, we're in a very precarious time for our business. One of the realizations I made at the beginning of COVID, you know, I do mentor some young women in the business, people reach out to me. We're going to lose a generation of engineers right now. We're going to lose a generation, and it's going to be a harder hit loss for women and people of color and transgender people, because the gap is so wide between the generations of women for me, like in the business. Like, you know, there's like Michelle and Carrie. The next level down, there's like Grace Royce and Kirsten and, you know, Jenny Douglas, and I'm kind of like the next level. And there's like such big year-wise gaps between these ladies. Like one of the things I struggle with is like, there's a very small pool of women at my level that I could recommend gigs to. And even those women are going to be phased out. So what's really important now, you know, we're in an education time for our industry, all these webinars that, you know, providers are providing, you know, stuff like this, these talks, we have to support the next generation. Like if you're doing a talk with like, you know, I've been very vocal in getting the brands like Digico, Shure, Sennheiser, and all these brands, and getting women on their panels, and not just like a woman panel. Like like women need to be on these panels. Like young women, people coming up in this business need to see women's faces doing this stuff. It's so important. It's life-changing to see someone that looks like you doing what you want to do. And, you know, now is a time where we could be censored or highlighted. And it was beginning to go censored for a lot of them until a lot of the women started to speak out, you know. And education is so important. We can't perpetuate the same ideals on the next generation. So, you know, as a man, if you're taking on, you know, a mentor or mentee or something, like, and they have some preconceived notion of what the business is going to be, or how people are treated, or how women are treated, like it's kind of your job to educate them on the proper, like how they should be acting in this business. Like I you know, I spend a lot of time talking to women about how to deal with the men in the business, and how to deal with the discrimination, and how to, like, you know, turn it around so it isn't like such a boiling point when it does come up or it comes to a head. Because the reality is most of us try to ignore it. Like, I don't want to be treated because I'm a woman. I don't want you to pay attention, you know, to any of that. So it's very strange for me, because the last 2 years, the whole business has changed to like, they want to hire me because I'm a woman, you know, versus before that, like it was hard to get a job because I'm a woman. And I think it's so important that our next generation is supported, you know, and has the right knowledge and the right steps. And I'm very worried about our current generation of engineers that are trapped in this quarantine and lockdown. Like, we're probably going to lose a year here of our business. So if anybody has mentees, anyone who's reaching out for them, like support them. Like they're the next ones. Like, we're not going to be able to do this forever. I can't do it forever. Like, you know, I can't tour until I'm like 50, but you know, somebody else is going to pick up my mantle. And the hope is that that person will take the jobs that I have. And that's how mentees work, you know, like they step into the roles. Like, my hope is that you know, when I step away from my Lizzo gig, that I can fill the gig with someone who will be a long-term incredible employee there, you know. And that will probably be someone like Michelle says, that's in my network. I've vetted, I've spent time with them. I know how they work. And that's so important, is to just spend time with each other and understand each other's work ethics, how we work, you know. And that's what's going to happen. Like men don't look at us. Yes, we're women, but we don't want to be treated that way. What I'd much rather have is you look at my skills. Like, don't look at my ass, look at my skills. Like, how did the PA sound? Like, how did my mix go? Did we have any feedback on stage? And, you know, Michelle talked about her network, but for me, yes, it's been my network, but what's gotten me gigs is my reputation for consistency and clarity and good communication, you know, because it's not even like one production manager. I'll work a gig and I get recommended to another gig from someone that I worked with because of my work ethic. So I let my resume speak for itself. I let my work speak for myself now instead of doing the speaking for it. And it's, you know, like Laura said, like I'm getting a lot of calls now for webinars and things like that. But I've also been a very vocal proponent of, you know, females and being a female in the business. And I try to offer solutions. So like, be conscious of what you're teaching the people after you. Be conscious of the next generation of engineers, because like Laura, Michelle, Fela, everybody has said that our next generation is, you know, we have to deal with some of this now, but the hope and what we're working for is that the next generation doesn't. That's why Michelle and Carrie, you know, started Sound Girls, because they recognize the issue. Like, what an incredible resource for women. It's changed the game for us, literally. And so imagine what we could do if we could really, really concentrate on networking and supporting other people versus tearing each other down.
I wanted to make this point a little bit earlier in terms of education, because after Susan's talk at the Live Sound Summit, I went, right, let's go and find, you know, we hire from colleges in our business. So I was like, well, let's go and find those engineers. And we have, you know, I think we have 2 female engineers in the sort of the last run. And so I spoke to them and I was just like, right, who's in your college? And there are, as far as I can tell, in our city, 0 people of color in the music colleges doing tech. So we kind of have to go, I guess, into schools, because I'm looking at the, you know, we can't say, well, we want it to be 50-50, especially in terms of like non-white. Our city is a very white city. So how do we look at that? Are we looking at a percentage of what are the diversity statistics in the general population, and how many of those people want to go into sound, and where does that happen? You know, Lorraine, you were saying earlier that as you get higher up the sort of ladder, it narrows and narrows and narrows, and there are fewer and fewer people. But it doesn't necessarily correlate that like everyone's going into college and then they're not getting work. Some of the people just aren't there because they don't see trans people working in the industry. They don't see female people working in the industry, or black people working in the industry, or whatever it is. So I think it's important. It's something that I'm going to sort of try and do. I've been talking to a couple of people about it, of just going into like earlier and earlier and earlier, saying first, like, you can do music and pay your rent. That is a thing you can do. And secondly, you can do that like whoever you are, whatever your background is. And I think it's a bigger issue, because without that happening, how are those rungs above going to fill in? You know, how are you then going to find somebody to do the Lizzo gig when there isn't anybody doing clubs? And how are the clubs going to find people if we're not hiring them to come and do, you know, small gigs? And that comes from the colleges and the schools. And I think things are moving in the right direction, but there needs to be a concerted effort to get there earlier.
Talking about the concerted effort, I've been thinking about this when we're talking about these people in like hiring positions and production managers and stuff. I recently did like my first bus tour, and it was awesome. It was an amazing experience. It was like a very diverse crew, like really strong leadership. It was great. But when I was getting hired for that gig, one awkward moment was that they were just really upfront that they had found me because they were asking around specifically for a female engineer. And they were like, yeah, you were the only one, so come on down and interview. And like, I welcome the opportunity. Like, I love it. Like, there's no other way. Like, how else am I going to make that jump to that level of gig? But like, how do you deal with the kind of gross feeling of the diversity hire, you know? Like, nobody wants to be the token. Nobody wants to feel like, okay, so you don't really care about my qualifications. Like, you didn't find me on my merits. But at the same time, I'm not going to turn down this gig. You know, how do we work with people in these positions of power to make that less awkward? How do, you know, is it just growing pains? You know, is this going to get better over time as we don't have to be as forceful about, you know, finding these people? I don't know. It's just something I was thinking about.
Years ago, about 5 or 6 years into touring, I got a call to do, I think Courtney Love was reforming Hole, and she wanted an all-woman crew. And it was like, oh, well, we want you to mix front of house. I'm like, no fucking way. Like, first of all, I don't want to work for Courtney Love. Sorry, you probably want to bleep that out in a second.
I think Courtney loves one of the names we don't have to worry too much.
Second, I wanted no part of an all-woman cruise. Like, what does that say about my qualifications? I just got the job because I'm a woman. Luckily, I had other work, so it wasn't, it wasn't a situation where I was like, well, this is all I have. And I can definitely see your point. And oddly enough, before I started touring, my early days in live sound, I was working I applied at an entertainment complex for a job in the AV department, and was flat out told from the department heads that they did not want to hire a woman. They had already had a woman in the department, and she was nothing but problems.
Yeah.
So it was probably the most ridiculous job application interview experience I've had in my life. Ultimately, I got the job, and a month later, and I kicked ass, and they came up to me and said, "We're so sorry what we put you through. You really changed our attitude." So I think, in those situations, that's what you have to do, is just you take the job and you show how amazing you are. And then if you have that opportunity to have that conversation, like, so, would you have a problem hiring women in the future? Would this make you look for more women? Because, it's not just a thing about a woman doing the job, So in your situation, like, yeah, you had a great opportunity to show people that, oh, we don't just have to have a woman on the tour. Women are great on tour. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was just a case of somebody really meaning well, but just going about it in kind of an awkward, ham-fisted way.
Yeah, this goes back to the conversation that we had over the summit. The potential there for people being employed as a token representative of any minority, but we were talking about women at the time. If people are just going to employ people just because they're a woman or just because they're black, then there's the potential there for employing people that are underqualified or underskilled when there are other people out there that could do the job just as well, women, men, whatever. And we discussed whether or not there's the potential for people to wrongly get the wrong impression of any group of people because of this sort of tokenistic employment system. If I'm not saying that people are right to make these generalities or assumptions, but if some local crew member has only ever seen through their own experience, has only ever seen women that have been employed just because they're a woman and have decided they were all terrible, then that's not a fair representation of women or of black people or of anyone. And I think it's as everyone said today, people should be employed on their skill and their qualifications, as much as formal qualifications mean anything in this industry. It's I'm including experience in with qualifications, but it is a tricky.
Yeah, it's very much about the subtlety of it, like you want to look for people that may not, that may not be in your network. You can use, the EQL degree or whatever, but it's more than just hire women blanket statement, hire diverse people blanket statement. It's more than that,
I want to interject here that 3 years ago, I didn't get hired because I was a woman, where people are not looking for women for positions. So I would like to say that is a really big, important change. And for me, my last 5 gigs I've gotten because I'm a woman. My mentality is completely changed on that subject. A lot of men were gonna argue like, oh, well, isn't that exclusionary? Well, bro, like all of your listings for the last 20 years have pretty much meant white dude. And like, I can guarantee you, I know because the people on BobNet, I got a job. I did monitors for Postmodern Jukebox. I got the job because I was the only woman that applied out of 150 applications. And he didn't put in there that he wanted women. He just, I'm looking for an engineer, but they wanted a woman and they didn't put it. So most women, when you're looking at a job, aren't gonna apply if it just says engineer, because we assume we're just not going to get the job. And like, I apply to everything, but most of the young women that I talk to, is that the case? So when you put female, you're looking for a female engineer, it's to try to like narrow the thing. There's so few of us, and there's so many, like all the dudes are still going to put in their applications, but instead of 1 woman, maybe you'll get 4. Like the reality is being a woman got me in the door. My resume and my skills are what kept me there. So like, yes, I got hired because I'm a woman, and I used to be very upset about that. But you know what? Like, the artists want women. Like, I got hired for Lizzo because she wanted a woman behind the board, a woman in her ears. She didn't want a man there. It's a space, it's a safety thing. So I find that more artists are wanting to carry women, or even production managers, right? They like to keep an equal split on the crew because they find that having females on the crew actually like lessens the broiness of the dudes that would all get stuck together, you know, or they find that women are a great balance. Like, I find that the case now is like, hey, we want to hire a woman, but not because, like, not the way that you're thinking, not because you're a woman. We want to hire a woman because we want to balance out our crew, or we want to make our artist more comfortable, or, you know, like, I've gotten a call to be a tour manager in front of house because I'm a woman, because it's a transgendered female artist who it would just be me and that artist traveling across the country, you know, me doing front of house and sound tour managing, and then the artist in a van together. You know, can you imagine spending that time if you're already uncomfortable with someone, you know, it's particular sex, you know, by yourself for hours at a time, having to travel, you know, I get it. So now it's starting to be more of a comfort thing where women would be seen more in like wardrobe roles and things like that. You know, they're starting to be into key supporting positions for female artists. You know, like Tegan and Sarah, that's my friend Amanda Davis. Janelle Monáe has a pretty much all female crew. The only man is the backline tech, and even on LMA too. So just artists are wanting to fill their energy with a feminine energy, you know, where they didn't have access to that before. Like, even as much as 5 years ago, it would be extremely difficult just to find a female monitor engineer. So I take it with a grain of salt. Yes, I understand your argument, but coming from where we've come from for the last 20 years in the business, like, this is a step forward. And then the language is just eventually going to change here. You know,
Yeah.
it's women now, but, you know, next year is probably gonna be like transgender people, you know, like it's the development. Like,
For sure.
We have to
I
give
don't want to feel like
change.
Yeah, I don't want to feel like I'm saying I don't want them to say, you know, we want women. It's just a matter of like, it's nice to know that I'm not the only one that kind of feels like Michelle was saying, like, I kind of don't want that. But sure, you know, it's part of the process.
I used to be like that too, until, you know, well, they're like, we want you because you're a woman. I was like, wow, that's kind of nice, but it's not an all-female crew. I've never been on an all-female crew, so.
I'm actually wondering about this, how this is in the US. I've seen it on the European crew sites, and I'm quite sure Liam has as well. Artists that then ask, we want a female so-and-so position to be filled. The amount of backlash you get from the cis white male population, like, why you can't do this, should be open for anyone. Like,
it's sexist.
Why is it, why can't you just hire the best? I am the best, so you need to hire me. I'm a man. Like, how does this relate to the US? Do you get the same kind of nonsense on the job boards?
Have you ever been on BobNet?
I have, but being not US, I don't get. I actually got one thing pushed my way, but it never worked out. But
you go on there and you look at the listings for, like, when they ask for a female engineer, and the comments are like unbelievable. It's worse on the Facebook. You don't even have to go on the listing. Go on the BobNet Facebook, and like, you can see it. And that's what really made me. It's what really made me be like, you know what? I am gonna take being hired as a female with a grain of salt, because all these salty dudes are over here being mad, and it kind of like, at this point in my career, it's kind of like, here's a little poke, like.
and there's something sticking up.
Like.
No, I hear you.
Lauren, the talk you gave at the summit, just to bring things to a little bit more of a technical subject, but still on the overall subject of diversity. You spoke of hearing differences between men and women, and I'm sure this plays into artist's choice, when particularly with a monitor engineer, like you say, you're inside their head practically. If you can hear things that they can hear, and a male monitor engineer might not be able to in those higher frequencies, then you're going to have a more comfortable relationship with that artist. Now, I'm not sure. There's another study. I'm not sure who it was that the study you referenced.
I have so many studies. I mean,
oh yeah, I'm sure they're all correct. There was a study I read recently, and this is a little bit off the diversity. Well, it's kind of not, but it's along the sciencey sort of side of it. There was another study that actually compared the hearing between people of different skin color. Now, I'm not sure if you've seen this study, and I'm not sure. I'll find it and I'll send you the link to it, because I'm not sure who did this study, but the part of the study I read made sense. Now, this study found that people of darker skin colors, regardless of race, but darker skin tones, actually had less hearing loss as they got older, because melanin content in the skin apparently protects the eardrum. Now that aside, going back to what you said earlier about the biggest issue you've had in your career has tended to be with local crews. Have you ever found, there you are, everyone shifted around a second there. Have you ever found that it affects local crews, whether you've been in with a show working for a male artist or a female artist? Do they look at an all-female production and give you more grief for that, or less, or do you ever see someone who might be usually more closed-minded seeing you with a male artist, and they might feel like that male artist somehow legitimizes you as a technician, or has there been any experience on either side of those? And the same goes for failures. If there's any sort of racial aspect to the same thing, does it basically, what I'm trying to ask is, do you get any different kind of reaction depending on what show you're in a venue with?
Yes and no. Like, some of what you're talking about I've never really dealt with. Like, I've never legitimized or felt legitimate because of the artist that I'm working.
No, I don't mean you. I mean in the eyes of the people who may have given you grief.
Yes. Well, there's a certain, I feel like there's a certain yes or no to that. Like, because of the artists I've worked for, that has what's given me the credence. Like, not like that they were a man or a woman. Like, yeah. Now everybody looks at my resume as like, oh, Michael Bolton. And I'm like, that was my easiest gig. Like, but that's honestly what people see before anything else on my resume now. So yes, that happens, but it's not like a male or female artist. Like, people also see Lizzo and are like, whoa, you did Lizzo. I have no idea who Michael Bolton is, but whoa. So, so I've never really experienced that side of it. But on the male-female hearing side of things, I do want to touch on that a little bit with everybody here. So we're all sound engineers. And one of the things that really very much frustrated me about being a sound engineer is that, well, I mean, you hear too, don't mess with me, Laura. I saw you. We all hear, and we all hear differently. Like, the reality is that men and women hear completely differently. The way we process sound is different. The way we lose our hearing is different. Even in the way we hear, our hearing threshold, our distraction by noise is completely different than a man's. I mean, I've been studying this for 10 years now. I've just started to put my studies together into cohesive speeches. I just gave my first one, from the Live Sound Summit. We've talked about it. But what I believe makes me so effective is that I know how I hear. Like, I've actually gone and got a hearing test, and I know how I actually physically hear. And now that I understand the science, I understand that a woman's hearing, her actual threshold of hearing, depending on the woman, is 6 to 8 dB less than a man's. And understanding that 3 dB is an audible doubling of sound, how loud is that difference for a man to a woman to the threshold of hearing? A woman is distracted at 6 to 8 dB less background noise than a man. Women keep our high end well into our 80s, where men's high end literally drops off at 35, like gone down to 12K. You start losing it. Like I have all of this compiled. So understanding how you hear on both the male and female side would make you a more effective engineer, and particularly for male monitor engineers mixing female artists. That is where I often see a lot of struggle. She's not happy. I can't get her the way she wants it to sound. You know, I have a lot of people come to me, and it's because men hear louder. They want to put things louder than a woman needs it. We have more, because we have estrogen, we process sound faster. So we can pick up more cues and things like that than sometimes a man can. Where like a woman can pick up, like, you know, sometimes men, how your lady will be like, I'm fine. And you totally miss the vocal cue, like totally miss it. It's programmed in your brain. Like you process sound on only one side of your brain. Women process on both. We have a cross-temporal processing of audio that allows us to pick up on certain emotional cues that sometimes men aren't programmed for. Also, a woman can have a masculinized cochlea, which makes their ear closer to what a man's would hear. So it's hard to say. I do believe there's some credence to the melanin theory, but the real difference in our hearing is actually in our neural processes and estrogen, which is the main audio processor in the body. So understanding how we hear as engineers will make us significantly more effective for every artist that we work with. So for me as a woman, I know that I have to make a mix louder than I would personally like it. If I know I'm mixing for a woman, if the mix is as loud as I want it, it's probably good for her. But usually if it's loud enough for me and I'm mixing a dude, it needs to be louder. And that's something that I've noticed.
Yeah. How would that translate to transgender people?
That is one of the things that I desperately want to study. I have been talking with hearing institutes and things like that, and transgendered friends of mine. I had a friend, Sav, who was transitioning. They were keeping a track of some of the things that were happening to them through the transition, because we talked at the beginning of their transition when they had just started hormones and they hadn't had top surgery or anything like that. So it's one of the things I'm really interested in. And in my study, I actually have a little side note that says there are very, very few studies on transgendered hearing or the effects of hormones on anyone. And so that's an area of study I'm incredibly interested in more than just like how transgendered people hear, but also to address hearing loss and treatments of hearing loss as we age as a population. So it's a subject very close to my heart. So, I mean, if you have an experience about it, I would love to hear it. I would love you to write it down. If you notice the big difference in your hearing in particular, I'd love to hear about it.
I've not done enough shows since, unfortunately. No, but in your study, if you are actually going to do it, try to do it as much as you can with people that actually start their whole transition. Like testing me.
No, yeah.
There's no pre and post that you can compare.
Unless you have a hearing test. Unless you have a hearing test that you've already taken.
I have. Yeah.
Then there you go. We have it before.
Yeah, true.
Also, Lauren, this is not to interrupt this, just because I don't want to forget it. Liam and I talked. In fact, last week in it, we mentioned yours because we got into the monitor conversation, and we were like, huh, because I remember you saying in one of those, you're like, this was, correct me if I'm wrong, you said like it was some study done in Korea out of working people. And we were like, wouldn't it be neat to have a study? So we were kind of, most of the people on the call said we would even be a smaller pool, a bunch of fellow sound engine humans for like, we totally do, even if it wasn't, I forget what the term is, sanctioned or whatever, do a like some kind of pool. You can be like, well, this is your, 30-year-old male, but here, Scott is a 30-year-old male sound engineer. Does this sound, because we're training, our ears are trained differently than the lay person, I know it's off the top of my...
Well, and I feel like, we're sound engineers and we have no idea how we hear, and we have no idea how the people who we mix for hear. And we have, as front of house engineers, there's so many things that we could change and do to allow everyone to be better. One of the things for me that I get, and I probably a lot of the ladies on here will get, like you can be not doing anything. You're like, your mix sounds so good. It's so clear. I get that so much. And it's just because the frequencies that we hear are different than a man's. Like, it's just different. So like this, we're it's unfathomable to me that we are sound engineers and we don't understand the science of the sound that we're doing. It's like unfathomable to me. Like, I know that we're like creative people too, but you know what? We are as technical and we are as much an engineer as an architectural engineer, as an electrical engineer, as a mechanical engineer. You know, we are just as technical. We are just as important. We are still an engineer. Like, yeah, you can't see what we do, but like it's still being done. We're calculating ohms and power and how to run cables and how to cover speakers within an inch, how to cover seats within an inch, how many decibels we want to hit them. So like if we understand that deep of science there, how do we not understand the science of our hearing and our ears? Like, we are responsible for the people that, and particularly monitor engineers and in-ears, we are responsible for our people's hearing. We're responsible for protecting it just as much as being effective as an engineer. With Lizzo, she was so loud. I had to come up with ways to protect her ears that I had never even thought I would be doing, like layers of compression that I had never even thought I would need because she's so dynamic. And that's I want to protect people's ears. Like, that's where my passion is like, I believe we have an entire generation of musicians who are going to have severe hearing loss in their older age because we have no idea how many decibels we're pushing into their ears. And as men, mixing for a woman, you hear 6 to 8 dB louder than a woman, the threshold. Imagine like what type of damage we've done to even female ears in that time, thinking that we, like a man, and not knowing, and it's just a not knowing type of thing, not knowing how different you hear, how much hearing damage you have done. You know what I mean? It's something I've become very passionate about because I deal with my own hearing issues from my job. Like, I have tinnitus in my left ear. Honestly, it came from skydiving. When I was touring with Rusted Root, my tour manager decided he was going to book a skydiving session between soundcheck and the show. I will never do that again until I'm done mixing. It popped my eardrums, like literally repressurized my ears. And so I've been dealing with tinnitus for the last 5 years of my life, which has kind of caused me to be even more passionate about it. I started down the path to figure out how to help with tinnitus. So like, we're engineers. You want to be effective, you want to like move forward, stop thinking, you know, I know we all want to be the same, but like, we've spent so much time creating products and creating microphones, and every like speaker we hear and every headphone you hear was based on like a man's spectrum and a man's vocal spectrum. So like, I'm very particular with the products that I put in the women's ears that I mix. Like, I have a certain list of products that I only use for women because the other ones, I can't use them. They don't sound good out of the box for women. Like, I love Shure microphones. We'll never use Shure IEM. I love Sennheiser's IEM. They're fantastic for females, but the hearing profile is closer to what a woman would like to hear. And Sennheiser is one of the companies that's actually working with me in my research that they're interested in it. So it's really interesting. And I am eventually going to like actually put out like a research paper and do like probably like an hour webinar on it for people that are interested. But it's just a matter of like I've never done anything like this. Like, I've never compiled a research paper. I've never put anything together. So, you know, we're engineers and we should use all of our tools.
And the kind of also in that, just while we're on this side discussion, is like, Laura, as a backline, you're just as important, because we had a talk last week where we were talking about Ken Pooch's seminar, where he talked about like the ingredients to a great mix. One of them is just great sound source, and we could have the best speakers, the best console, the best whatever, but if that guitar is out of tune, we are screwed royally, and you're part of that equation. Like, so I think, but also on that whole bit is like, well, then how are your ears? You know, take gender, whatever, which is still important, but just take that out of the equation. How is a backline tech's hearing different from an engineer's? Because you're listening for something that's different than what we're listening for.
Yeah, well, I've definitely noticed that on the transgender bit, as my hearing is actually not that good anymore. I've got a 3K and a 6K dip on my left ear, cymbals and guitar speakers. I do notice that, and about of 18 years full time, I've been about 12 years on in ears, predominantly either actually listening to a mix or listening to whatever I choose myself from my own setup. And sometimes just as protection, because some of these bands are super loud. Ministry, 112 dBs on stage. Who needs that? Yeah, I do listen in a very different way. I've got a roommate now since a month. We listen to the thunder outside. I cannot hear the thunder outside anymore. But if 3 rooms further in my house, I hear a pin drop on the floor, and I can tell you it's a metal pin with a plastic head. It's so bizarre. I can pinpoint exactly what I'm hearing. I just don't hear it anymore for some reason. Loud noise, it's gone.
It's fascinating. Transgender
Tiniest detail.
Fascinating.
Yeah, but that's not the transgender bit. That's just the backliner, I think. Being focused on, like, and I could actually tell monitor engineers, like on a 12-track mix in like 27 channels, I could tell them like channel 3 out of 12 is slightly lower because I don't hear the cowbell quite as loud as the hi-hat. And they're like, no, it's equally green. It's like, no, it isn't. So I can hear those details. I probably couldn't save my life to put a mix together for someone, but I can hear exactly what isn't right. And as Scott was saying, as a backliner, you're at the very source of the polishing a third, with all respect, skill that we try to do. If on my end of the things it's not good, you can be the best engineer in the world, but you cannot make it sound good if my line is noisy, if the guitar is out of tune, if the levels aren't right. So yeah, go Doreen.
Doreen, you're muted.
I was like,
Muted.
hold on. I just had a thought, and that was I wasn't going to say anything. I was touching my.
Okay.
I wanted to
yeah.
show you. I'll show you.
Okay. Yeah. Hearing for a backliner is definitely important. We're using it in a different way than you are, obviously. And I'd on the transgender bit, actually, I do think that my hearing has changed because I listen to the same thing at a lower volume. Like as Loreen was saying about the estrogen, before I'd had my UEs at a certain level, and I don't want it there. And with the musicians where I actually copy their mix, for my main band, Blind Guardian, they have UE10s, I have UE11s. They listen to their belt pack at what is it, Sennheiser? Yeah, it's the Sennheiser's UE3s, G3s, sorry. They listen to it at 5 out of 10. I push it as low above 1 as I can without the compression kicking in, and that's already too loud for me. And I know that I've got a hearing problem, that I lost a lot already, and still that stuff's too loud. And that's pre-transition already. They're supposed to start, get starting up somewhere in the next year again. They were going to do it this year. But I'm curious to see how that pans out.
Yeah, and it's just so you don't feel like Laura, you're the only one alone on this. Like, I'm one of the few engineers, I feel, at least in my experience, without getting into a long story, I live with my mother, and she has like amazing hearing. Like, yes, we can go on the whole thing, but like, she has amazing hearing, and that for a woman, and then like you know, sorry, so it was getting so many things, but long story short, I've had to train my ears because she has such amazing hearing that then I also, so like, I think Laura, you mentioned where like sometimes females have a different part. I forget what it's saying, but it's like how, so my point I'm trying to get at with this is I have amazing hearing, and often I don't play loud music. I could have the potential to, but I don't. Even in my car, I'm by myself. After a certain point, it's like volume. There was even a day I was just alone. I was like loud. I'm like, after 5 minutes. But what I'm getting at is I'm one of the few sound engineers who gets told you can actually turn it up. I've had a house manager go up to me one show and go, I can't believe I'm saying this to an engineer, but can you make it louder? Just because like I prefer, and I also think any show, this is on a side rant too, any show is like, man, let's make it as loud as possible. I'm like, no. If you see people cupping their ears in pain, you're doing your job wrong.
Well, it's funny, like you can, so one of the scientific things is you can have a masculinized cochlea, which means that you can also theoretically have a feminized cochlea if you're a man. It doesn't necessarily change all of it. Like it's not going to change how you lose your hearing because you don't contain estrogen, but it is going to change how your actually accepts and receives sound. Like a female with a masculinized cochlea doesn't have as many autoacoustic emissions as a regular female. Autoacoustic emissions, if anybody doesn't know, when your ear turns off and it makes like a sound, like literally it sounds like someone goes like this and then your ear starts ringing. You can literally put a microphone in the cavity of your ear and like record that noise. It's how they actually test to see if infants are deaf or not, because that's the sign of a very healthy cochlea. And women have significantly more autoacoustic emissions than men do. And so that's one of like the signs that you might have a feminized cochlea, is if you have a significant amount of autoacoustic emissions every day. Men still get autoacoustic emissions, but it's much less frequently than a woman because we have estrogen. The hairs in our ears react in a different way. And then we process sound a little differently across our lobes. And that's not to say that we hear better. That's not true. We hear different. We evolutionarily had to hear differently. Men are much better at sound localization. And in fact, women have a increased anticipation time of sound. So where say something might be 20 feet away, for a woman, our actual localization thinks it's more like 15 feet. And it's actually an evolutionary feature in women because we were considered more of the prey. So it's a fight or flight response. It gives us more time to react to a threat.
And you're the protector, not just of yourself, but of your offspring. And the man needs to locate, because the man needs to hunt.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
Vertical and horizontal localization of sound in men is much more precise than a woman. Where our frequency retention is much higher, because realistically, if you actually frequency analyze a baby screaming and crying, like the frequencies that they're producing are 12K plus. Like you can, it's insane. I don't know, it's changed it's kind of this knowledge made me even more passionate about equaling the playing field for women in this business, because it like made me realize, how many, like hearing loss is a thing. Like I've always been very conscious of it. It's very sensitive. Like, and I like nothing in the entirety of sound was developed with us. Not even like for us, around us, but with us, with a woman in mind, with our ears, with our voice. No one. And I wanted to change that. There's not even full studies. Like no one has compiled the information that I just compiled for me to tell you this. No one has done that. It's like wild to me that no one has done it. Like, I don't think I'm that groundbreaking or cool. You know what I mean? Like, but no one has compiled this research. And I think it's bizarre. I think it's bizarre that we don't know how women and men hear differently. And I find that it's a different form of gaslighting. Like I hear things that men don't hear and they're like, man, you're crazy. And be like, no, I hear it. Like, can't you hear that thing? Yeah. I know. Most of us do be like, can you hear that? Like I can hear things in like the other room, and dudes be like, no, I don't hear anything. So
And Laura,
more passionate.
I had mentioned this last week. When you had mentioned that if as when I'm doing monitors front of house, if an artist is telling me I hear something, if I don't hear it, I'm like, I don't care. In the sense of like the artist has gone out of their way to tell me they're hearing something wrong. they're hearing it, even if I can't. So like just that whole idea of someone saying, oh no, you don't hear it. Then why are, first of all, like the fact that you've spoken up to me to say there's something means there's a problem. It's like the same,
There is something.
right. And it's like, it's someone saying like, do you smell smoke? Your first thought is not going to be, oh, you're just making up that smell. No, everyone's thought's going to be, maybe there's fire. So it's like, why are we making up denial for hearing?
Lauren, in your pursuit for knowledge of the difference between male and female hearing, has there been any information on whether or not there's any difference in echoic memory? I read recently that it's, roughly speaking, 2 to 4 seconds of echoic memory before it gets moved into short-term memory and then long-term memory, depending on how your brain prioritizes whether or not it actually needs to keep that information. Do we know if there's any difference between those time lengths between men and women?
Yes.
If you played a tone, for instance.
Yeah, there's actually a significant difference.
Right.
Because of the estrogen, they found out that estrogen is the main auditory processor in the body, as well as what initializes short-term memory. So women already process sound faster. Like we are actually already faster at processing sound than men. So on top of that, our estrogen allows us to more quickly associate short-term memory with sound. That is actually in my stuff, in my studies on particularly estrogen and hearing. I posted in the comments, I posted a couple of hearing threshold things from my study. So you guys can kind of get an idea of like the loudness tolerance levels and the hearing thresholds at different frequencies for men and women. So you can get a little bit more of an idea about it.
The first one is impossible to download.
Really? I'll see if I can get another one.
Yeah.
I don't know how to do, I've never really uploaded.
I click, nothing. And the other one, click, save, done. It's really weird.
Interesting. Huh.
Yeah.
Mine have both gone to click to open.
Okay, then it's just me.
Yeah, and also sometimes Zoom just does not like to, it doesn't like to play nice with some things.
Yeah.
Honestly, I'm going to say this publicly.
Yeah.
The only reason I use Zoom for this is because everyone uses it. I prefer not to, but it's one of those things where it's like, personally, I like for example, Google Hangouts better. But the problem is you have to have a Google email and there's so many other ones that are better, but it's just like, because my whole point of this is I want to try and include as many people on these talks as possible. And this is not me going to sandbag anything. It's just as a heads up, kind of going to wind down, it's not like in the next minute, but in the Zoom, we're going to kind of end this, but don't worry. We've got Liam and I plan to have this be a weekly thing. So I'm kind of,
we're going to be tackling more subjects. I'm sure diversity will come around again, and anyone that wants to join us is perfectly welcome. Some of the sessions are going to be probably more technical based, or following other subjects. But yeah, if anyone feels like they'd want to come and join us again and discuss some audio stories or experiences, then everyone's welcome.
Yeah, and if you have people who who would be like, man, I want to talk about gear. I've been so bored in COVID. I got no one else to talk about gear with. Invite them. That Zoom link I gave you, send it to them. That's this whole point is if you just send it out.
So is it every Monday at the same time?
Yeah.
Pretty much. If there's a change, I will let people know. I unfortunately will not be at the next one due to I am taking an OSHA 10 class. So expect in the future to actually safety will be a big discussion because
the one the following week will be about
I have a huge passion about safety in our industry and how some of it exists and how there still needs to be more, but that's a whole topic that I don't want to I can get going on that one for a while.
Speaking of different topics, if there is anything that anyone wanted to maybe get other people's experiences on or opinions on, and wanted to suggest a topic of discussion, then just drop an email to Scott or myself, and we'll make that happen. Because obviously, if there's subjects that people want to talk about, then it makes for an actual discussion rather than us just. I mean, we've got a list of ideas of things that we'd like to talk about, but we can only speak for ourselves. If we invite a lot of people to a discussion, and it turns out to be something that nobody's really got any interest or anything to say about, then we've wasted our time. But if people do have anything, if people wanted to talk about, I don't know, a favorite microphone or whatever, then let's do it. We're open to suggestions.
Yeah, so I feel like on this, if there's anyone else kind of wants to like have maybe some closing discussions on this whole thing, because I know we kind of went a little off rails, but that's also, again, the whole point of this. There's all these have been just general discussions and just see where it goes. And sometimes we found both last week and I personally found this week, sometimes the best discussions have come up from stuff we didn't even plan from the start. And there were stories I heard and just ideas. I was just like, I never thought about that. So floor is everyone's.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you guys for having a conversation and inviting me in. And it was cool to share and hear. And yeah, I look forward to hearing more. I'll try and get in on the next one. Thank you guys for having me.
No problem.
Yeah, thank you.
I tried to keep any kind of background research to a minimum. Obviously, there was a few people here this evening who we already knew from Live Sound Summit, and there was a few people who Scott and I, sort of scrolling through places like Sound Girls, came across. Fela, was your profile the one that said you liked Lewitt microphones? Was that
Yeah.
You? Yeah. Well, there's a future discussion, because that's something that stood out. I knew that it stood out to me from someone's profile, because it's not something you see very often. or certainly I don't see very often.
Yeah. Well, that was part of like my business and business plan, kind of, and how we kind of raised capital to even start the business was to do videos on all different types of gear. So I mean, I rep Lewitt, Focusrite, Digico. I've done some endorsement stuff with. So like that kind of like stacked us to where we could start a business, a recording business, a live recording thing in the city, and that's kind of how that grew. But it was again from the internet and putting out there what we did, but using certain products and just showing how that sounded. And like that's a whole nother kind of career, because every manufacturer needs somebody to show that their product works. So
definitely.
Yeah. So that's been a big thing for us as a company. Is getting endorsements and really with the right. If we don't like your stuff, we don't. We don't mess with you. But I mean, it's all the kind of pretty high end. Whether it's cables too, we rep Klotz Cables, Wire World, even some Neumann. We've done some stuff with their Howard monitors and stuff that we use in our studio in the podcast world. So again, all of this makes sense for me as far as podcasting. I have like 3 podcasts going too. So if anybody want to check those out, I have one that's called The Art of Music Tech, and that's like my audio toy podcast with my business partner. So anybody that's onto that, check it out. We're on Apple, Spotify, and all that kind of stuff.
Art of Music Tech.
Yeah, check us out.
Looking at that one.
All right.
Yeah, I just took a look at it. It's like, wow, you got a lot of episodes you've already posted.
Oh yeah. We've been around for 4 years. So yeah, I've been in the podcast thing. Once it became affordable, it was like, oh, okay, now you can afford. Because many people don't realize, like 8 years ago, it cost like thousands of dollars for the space, for server space and stuff like that. Like But now, you know, $14 a month and you can go unlimited podcasting. And, you know, we're able to do this now, even with the COVID going on. You know, it's very, you know, minimal people, you know, up to 2 guests or so in the studio. So, you know, having a business even when I'm not on the road, and I'm really pulling back from being on the road to concentrate more on this kind of stuff, because it's just not going anywhere. And everybody needs it, whether you're a dentist or you know, if you own a business, you kind of have to get the word out about what you do.
Yeah.
Be a long, you know, I want to hear somebody going long form discussion. If you're a master at it, you should be able to talk about it for an hour. So it's been a great, you know, sales tool for everybody. So yeah, check us out. And yes, One of One Production Studio, Fort Lee, New Jersey. Check us out. We're online. Definitely.
Excellent.
She is. She's so
Thank
humble.
you.
She is really a boss. Like you, when did I come to your studio? What, like 6 years?
Yeah. Yeah, and that was actually here. That was at my partner's apartment. That was where we started, but now we have a studio. Yeah.
Where you are now is insane.
Exactly. So hey, when you come
when
back.
she talked about the cables, I was there. I was there when she got the first cables in. That's when I went to your studio. Whenever you got those really fancy, expensive cables in, that's the day I was there. And now I have a podcast. I have whole studio space. I'm doing this. And I was like, you're such a badass.
Yeah, you know, just growing from one thing to the next and never stopping. And so it created me to, I've been able to not have anxiety about anything, because I feel like everything is in my hands. Nothing is out there. Nothing I have to wait to get hired. Now I'm just like, oh, okay, I'm just going to create my own thing. Because I mean, we all have this technical ability that can help other people besides just the music industry. Business owners and entrepreneurs love what I do, and they're like, oh, how can we do this with my business? And we've been able to create video, create podcasts, create, you know, great content for all these other things that are, I'm going to say it even more appreciative a lot of the times in the music industry. Because it can just get very like, wow, like whatever. I know I can get another engineer anytime, any day. You don't get that so much when you own the business and you're helping out other entrepreneurs or people that realize that you're a master at what you do. Then I don't have to do a tap dance for you, and I'm over that.
Yeah, and I found in fellow, you just like. I'm saying your name right. I hope I'm not butchering.
Fela, yep.
Fela, okay, Fela. I try hard to just, if someone is giving me their name, to say it right. So, in your bit too about like how they seem more appreciative. Like I've also worked with musicians who they do it as a hobby. They're not touring, because sometimes most of my work, I'm usually what I like to call the touring house guy. I'm the house guy, but I go to different venues, you know, as local. But point is, sometimes I'll get bands who they're doing this as a hobby. They have no aspirations to, you know, get on a bus. But sometimes they're the more appreciative ones of what I've done, because they usually have a day job. So they're not in the I'm a rock star, I'm a pop star, whatever mentality. So they're doing a 9-to-5 job. So when they see someone like me or anyone here doing that, they're like, oh man, that was awesome. Thank you so much. And it's also because, to at least in my experience, someone can say something differently. Even musicians, whether it be singers, guitar players, whatever instrument, they always think, well, I've mastered this instrument and I know everything because I'm a musician, but they don't know anything about our job. So there's this weird, like, they think, well, I know better. Yeah, with the exception of doctors, seems to be the only weird one, because they're also in such a, like, I've heard horror stories of like doctors that, like, from like my corporate friends. They're like, oh God, this doctor, he held the mic upside down. Why do you even do that? But like any other thing, they're like usually like open to like, hey, you know, mind just holding it up here? Oh, thank you. You know, they're like always so appreciative because they're not in this field. So it's I don't know, it just kind of feels like they're more appreciative.
Yeah. It's been fun. Like lately, it's like, oh yeah, okay, I'm not gonna get browbeat. Like, why didn't you know? Yeah. Yeah, it's really cool. It's a different vibe.
Do you find there's any difference in terms of I kind of just had the word elitism going around in my head there. Is there any difference between studio land and live land when it comes? I'm not only people, but upcoming tech manufacturers. Is there a difference between who's more receptive to new
Oh yeah.
technology coming in?
Yeah, yeah, and it's a lot that I'm glad you brought that up because a lot of the manufacturers that we deal with, they're up and comers. They're my age. They're like mid-30s, and they're like they left JBL or they left Sennheiser to start up their own thing, and so their marketing budget is nothing. So anybody that can give them video is like, oh, you're a lifesaver because you're helping to get the product out there.
Yeah.
And there's just so much affordable stuff out there now that people that left those really big companies that are doing amazing stuff. And that's pretty much who we highlight and who a lot of the type of companies that we are able to help in marketing and doing video for them. So like you said, Lewitt, the owner of Lewitt, left AKG. So I mean, you'll even see it in the shape of their microphones. It kind of looks like, a 414. But yeah, but he did his thing and just made it more affordable, sounds great. And I want to get that out to people and not as like, oh, I just want a bunch of mics from you. It's like, no, I really want this to move and I want this to be out on more stages because it can just help everybody. Even if you're fresh out of school, you can afford $150 condenser to start something, whether it is a mobile podcast and in between mixing gigs. So yeah, that in the last like 5 years I really started to concentrate on that niche and helping that out and going to places like AES, NAMM, and talking with the manufacturers about how we can help and what they need from us and how we can help each other.
Yeah, it's I've got a couple of Lewitt mics, and there's a small, like really small UK firm called Sontronics that are only
they're great too.
I would say probably maybe 10 years old. So they're not an old company, and it seems to be all these in my experience of working in a venue and of touring. It seems to be more sort of studio based people that have actually heard of these brands, and a lot of the live guys that I've come across have never even heard of the brand, let alone of the microphone model. So I was just wondering, like,
because that's how I found out about it, is from another live engineer.
Oh, really?
Rick Camp, Rick Camp is a legend in the game. He did Beyonce, J-Lo, just like and I read about it through him before an AES one year, like 7 years ago. And I was like, okay, I need to find out about these guys. And and then, we were able to work some things out and we've been working together like 6 years. We've been doing content for Lewitt. So, yeah.
Excellent.
I love to jump in. I feel like live, it takes a lot longer to implement new changes. Like,
yeah, that too.
Like,
is that down to scheduling? Is it, if you approach someone who's already mid-tour and say, can I interest you in this microphone? Are they more likely to turn around and just say, nah, I can't change microphone mid-tour?
Yeah.
They'll try it. They'll try it at a sound check or something, and it depends on how it performs. Like, most of the best engineers I know, they take new information and learn from it. And that's how, new things get implemented into the live industry versus like a manufacturer coming in and be like, I have this thing. No, the engineers have to go out and be like, I want to change this thing, or I want to change the way that this is done. And they innovate what's coming in. The only big manufacturer I feel like that's to live microphones in the last like 5 years, the two big ones I feel have really started to hit in the last couple of years. DPA have been around forever, but DPA has really moved into the live circuit in a more mainstream way. And SE vocal mics too have really moved into a powerhouse in the business, working with artists like Timberlake or Justin Timberlake. They sent stuff out to me. and they've been really making moves, but it's really hard to get engineers to, particularly live engineers, to like try brands that they don't know without doing it, like without, you know, knowing. Like a lot of guys are like, I only use Shure microphones. And then they look at me like I'm nuts when I have like different types of microphones on my list. Like it's not all one brand. Like I'll have like Audix on my toms, or Shures for my overheads, you know, or I'll have, you know, like,
well, yeah, and that comes from me working at Claire and having my hands on every microphone under the sun. You can get, you know, caught up on that. Oh, I only use this, but it was the fact that I got to hear everything, and I got to, you know, I had the ear of what I did like for what I wanted to take out on the road when I got the chance. I wasn't even out on the road, but I knew what the Sennheiser 604, the 901 or whatever, what those sounded like on my toms, and with the 52 or with the I knew what I liked where before I went out on tour, because I got my hands on it. Because at all of these small clubs, it's just going to be a bag of 57, 58. I mean, that's so then I just started bringing my own microphones, and then I got known for being a better engineer. Everybody liked the sound because you heard different microphones. I mean, you know, it's like, oh, why does it sound so much like clearer or better? Something is different from last night. It's like, yeah, because I'm not using the house gear.
Yeah. Here's a beautiful segue back to diversity. You can have your Shure only people, your Sennheiser only people. No, you know what mic works best on this drum kit, on that tom. Use that microphone. On the kick, you don't want the same brand's kick mic because it sucks. Diversity, not just in the crew, but in the gear as well.
I mean, knowing what sounds better on a woman's voice than a man's voice. There's definitely different mic. You can't use the same microphone on those two. Yeah. So absolutely. You have to train your ear to that, and you have to be aware of it. Not just, oh, I want to get on tour, but you also need to know what your ear, what's out there. Being in a warehouse for Claire, I also got to see the boards. I would see what people were EQing. I saw what Alicia Keys's or Beyonce's engineer. When it came back, it's like, oh, okay, I do that too. 250 out on the vocal. Okay, I high pass filter. Oh, okay. Like I was reading what everybody was doing.
Yeah. You also need to learn what you don't, and you need to learn what you don't hear.
Yeah. Well, you also know how to use your tools. Like a microphone is a tool. A board is a tool. Yeah, so to be most effective, you have to effectively know how to use your tools. Even in as much as a crew person, you're a tool. You are an end piece. You're a can opener. You make the thing happen. So knowing how to properly use your people, use your tools. That's why the title of my speech that I did is called "Using Your Tools: The Science and Application of Male and Female Hearing." Like it's a tool. So like what you're saying, Fela, like you could walk into any room and make anything sound good because you know how to use your tools.
Oh yeah. Totally.
You could have a tin can for a PA and it'll still sound good.
Yeah.
We're talking about employing people for their skills and their experience, and it's the same again for microphones. You pick something that's right for the job, I suppose.
Like Jason earlier, his point. He made the same point earlier. He just, in a little bit of a roundabout way, but hit the Caribbean engineers. They know how to use their tools. That's why they can outmix everybody here.
Yeah.
I was gonna, Fella, continue what you said. Is like one thing I did before this whole COVID thing was there was a venue I work at who I'm really good friends with the tech director, and I'm like, hey, can I come in on this day? No shows going on. It's like, sure thing. So what it allowed me to do is sit down with one of my favorite boards, the CL5, and get to really know it to the point where I'm like, I know this thing's quirks. I know what it can and can't do. I know how the system works. And it's that, and just, I would also, so it's just like it's practicing your craft. What we're doing, we all think it's like, oh, well, it's just win the band. It's like, no, you got to practice and like, you know, things like Sound Gym and things like this is just constantly educating. But it's just like that idea. I'm like, okay, I'm not the only one who's like, well, let's try something slightly different.
Yeah, just studying what, you know, I would read, you know, trade mags to see who was going out with what, but being able to be at Claire and just seeing everything that went out, and then their technology that they did on their own, it was just like, it was world class. It was like, oh, okay, this is how you get the sound that's gonna rock 80,000 people. And that was that was the goal. That was what I wanted to get to. So you have to know where you are to your goal, and how you know, what are the people that's already doing that goal are doing. And that was the great thing about just working for a while for a big company, and just taking in all of that knowledge. Yes, it's needed.
Hey, Jess.
Hey, what's up?
There might have been a miscommunication with the time zone. You actually missed a big chunk of the whole talk.
Oops.
Well, you're here, and we're literally just now, we've been talking, and we went from our diversity talk and now just talking about gear, and just like Fel and I were specifically talking about how like we used our opportunities that we had, or made opportunities to keep learning, where we just didn't do the same thing that every engineer was doing. It was like, you know, Fella was talking about how she was using microphones that weren't just this 57, 58 on everything, and how I was using a venue's off time to like use gear. So welcome to this
this tech discussion at the end of a diversity discussion.
Yeah.
One before I totally get away from the subject of Lewitt, but probably goes back to what you were saying about young companies being sort of hungry for the business. I bought a 540 off eBay. And it was the original 540 before they brought out the 540S. It was delivered. I didn't even take it out of the box for months, and which was a stupid thing to do. And when I finally opened the box and plugged it in, there was nothing. It was dead. And I sort of heart sunk that kind of moment. I thought, well, I could try and get in touch with the seller, but chances are at this point they're just going to say, this was, you know, sold it to you months ago, it left us working fine. So I just bailed on that idea totally and just got in touch with Lewitt direct, just asking whether or not it was something that they could service. Could it be repaired? They got back straight to me and just said, look, we're not sure what the issue is. We can't tell without actually looking at it. If you send it to us in Vienna, we'll have a look at it and we'll let you know whether it's repairable. Boxed it up, sent it off, got an email back really quickly. I've got bad news. Unfortunately, your microphone's completely dead. But if you like, you know, if you want, if you don't mind, we can send you a brand new 540S in the post, you know, unless you want the old one back. And I was like, no, the 540S will do me just nicely, thank you. And it arrived 2-3 days later, perfect. Yeah. So I mean, that was some impressive customer service.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
it was
they're great like that. They're
it was a microphone that, yeah, and it you know, it had come off eBay. It certainly wasn't under warranty. But they did absolutely everything they could to look after me. So yeah, I was really happy with that.
Yeah, let's talk more. Yeah, let me know when you guys talk more about them. But
yeah,
we're huge on them.
But what's interesting is, Liam, you mentioned it's like, you know, is the industry like resistant to change? It's like perfect example. Like, I forget. See you later, Gregory. Thanks for coming. SC48. I still see that freaking board. I don't hate it, but it's like, I look at it, go, like I did a gig about last summer. Their front of house had a CL5, monitors had an SC48, and I'm like, why? You have to now use a splitter for the audio. There's just so much, and I'm not hating on the 48, but I'm just like, and I'm sure, Laura, you can maybe attest to, like, maybe in your part of the industry too, it's just like, there's so much of like resistance to change in terms of technology. Now, I admit I am not the first person who will try the newest thing, but it's like, yeah, Jess, I think it does. If it crashes, like, Windows,
it has blue screens of death.
yeah, which is, but it's like, and it's like people, and to order to make it work, to make it sound good, you have to like either add like like an entire like 5-foot tall road case of outboard gear, or rely on a wave server. I'm like, why are you still using this in 2019, 2020? Like, I saw one literally like, and not to get political, but it was when Bernie Sanders was running. He was doing one in the state capital of Vermont, and Brandy Carlisle was opening up for him to be kind of the hype band. His guy had an her guy had an SC48, and I'm like, why? Like, I understand brand loyalty, but I'm like, why are you still using this in 2019? And I'm like, to my knowledge, correct me if I'm wrong, the SC48 doesn't even have a mobile iPad app. And I'm like,
no, it doesn't.
So why are you're
positively it doesn't? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure there's like a hodgepodge way you can do it using like remote stuff. I'm like,
I've never seen it.
Yeah, there's weird workarounds, but like, yeah.
Me either.
Yeah, so what the point is going is just like, we're in an industry that still uses, there are still some, and I'm sure everyone in here who tours can agree, there's still some like acts that are refusing to switch to digital and will still carry around a big honking analog board. And it's like, yeah, there's the art. I'm like, if you want the analog sound, just get a preamp and get like a tool channel preamp and put it on your master bus.
Yeah. I rarely see people come out with the big analog anymore. I in New York or New Jersey, I rarely see that. So
I see it once in a while, and like, whatever, if that's your jam, do it. If that's your sound, that's what that's what everything, especially like, I think artists can get reliant on it too. Like, oh no, I don't want anything to change, right? Is always like the big fear and panic, which could be a factor with the SC48 and the profiles too. But I mean, I think the simple reason that they're still around is because they still somehow run. So somebody has to cook up a virus and nuke these things so that we never have to work with them again.
You don't have to cook one up. From what I've heard, because I was listening to one of an interview where someone was saying like, if he's using an SC48, before the guest engineer gets to put the stick into it, he virus scans it. So just put a regular virus, because the thing runs Windows. Get a Windows virus.
Exactly. Could have happened in the pain.
Yeah. I'm sure it's one of those things that'll eventually go. Well, sorry, Laura, what were you going to say?
No, as we were talking before about engineers picking up new gear, I'm sure the engineers would. I would too, but the musicians don't like it. Like Jess was saying, they're used to how the profile of the 48 sounds. I've also had it the other way around. I worked for Porcupine Tree for many years. Their session guitar player, we actually during rehearsals, he could do whatever he wanted with his 2 pedal boards. But once the tour started, he was not allowed to change it anymore. He still would. And he had all these analog vintage pedals on his pedal board. But whatever he does affects all the other people in the band and the crew on the other side. So basically, well, it was probably easier because he was a session guy in the band. He was not in the band. But like certain changes you just don't want on a tour, because it affects everything in the signal chain for everybody involved. Do these things in rehearsals, do these things off the road, and then, hey guys, I've got this new great microphone. I'd like to try this out in the next rehearsals. But don't change a winning team. I think that's especially what the musicians would come down to, and they are reliant on us. They're also relying on us to not screw them over. And if all of a sudden their vocal mic is a lot brighter, they don't know what they don't know what's happening.
Yeah, this kind of goes back to what we were discussing just a second ago about the difference between studio and live, and whether or not whether studio engineers, maybe if they're working with a smaller act or whatever, have got a bit more time to play around with different technologies, new microphones, new compressors, or whatever. For live touring crew, like Laureen said, there's usually that point in a sound check where you can throw an extra pair of overheads on for the sake of the sound check if you want to listen to a matched pair of whatever. But how many times could that have happened where someone's heard this new pair of microphones and thought, oh, actually they sound really good, but let's stick with the ones that we've got for now, and then maybe change them down a bit further down the road. And then when it comes to the end of the tour and the start of the next one, they're just like, I can't really remember what it sounded like. Let's just go with the one that the one that we've always had. And it's that.
Yeah, you gotta have a flexible artist that's okay with it. I've dealt with flexible artists that's okay with. Usually whatever I'm bringing, it's just gonna sound it. It's gonna make it sound crispier, or it's gonna add something to it. So
I suppose it comes down to the trust that the artist has in you for.
And then I deal with a lot of jazz artists, so they don't really listen to monitors. They're listening to themselves. So I kind of get free range on what I get to do in front of house with the microphone, because they're just listening to themselves. It's not, and on the stage, sometimes I don't even have monitors on the stage. It kind of depends on who it is, but kind of for my taste anyway.
I think it also depends in part on how tech savvy the artist or artists are. If they are basically saying, I just perform, you do whatever you do to make me sound good, you've got more of a free of a blank check to do things. But if they're like, so what are you doing? Well, I actually have this at home and I do this with this gear in the studio. With them, you're not going to get that chance because they're too conscious of what could possibly go wrong during the show. So they're like, don't touch it, hands off, next tour.
It's that.
And from the backline side of things, I definitely get closer to this kind of anxiety from the musician. As a monitor engineer, I think you're equally close. But if you're doing front of house, you don't even see this, you don't notice it. You just think like, ooh, how can I make this better? Yeah, but does it necessarily get better for the musician?
Yeah,
sorry, go on.
Unless you're like working with someone like Prince, which we actually in our notes, that's going to be a whole, it's going to be a whole session where all we're doing is talking what I call the Prince syndrome, because I've heard so many stories about Prince and like good, bad, in between, but all that. But there's sort of that kind of artist. You're very rarely is the artist going to come to front of house and tell you, yeah, there's too much of this or too much of that, change it because I said so. So that doesn't usually, because they hired you, so they got to trust who you hired. But sometimes you have that, but it's not. Thank goodness I haven't run across that a lot. So
I've heard the story of him being someone sneaking him out to front of house in a flight case. So they've wheeled him out to front of house inside a flight case, and then he, opened the flight case up behind the sound engineer, just so that he can listen to it without them knowing that he's there. That's taken things to a pretty
I have
pretty extreme.
I have words to say on a lot of the Prince stories, but to get on more like what, I forget at this point who said it, but it was like that when you have, I think Laura, you said it, when someone says like, oh yeah, I happen to do this at home. That my first thought is like, oh God, this is going to be one of those days, because it's back to what we were saying earlier about like why sometimes the people who do it as a hobby are more thankful and more appreciative to what you're doing. But the minute they put themselves as, well, I happen to do this on the side, they immediately think studio translates to live, and we all know that does not work. Yes, some things do translate. Proper grain structure is proper grain structure no matter where you are, but man, there's it's a whole different beast at a certain point.
Yeah, I think it's I think it's called the Dunning-Kruger effect, where people who know a little bit about something always assume that they know everything about it, and it's the people that actually know the most realize how little they know. So it's the people at the top are willing to admit that they might still have a lot to learn, and people sort of stuck at the bottom end, because they literally just haven't learned how big of an ocean of knowledge there is out there. They assume that they've learned it all already. So it's a little bit of knowledge is dangerous kind of situation. Like you said, though, I mean, there's some people at that level who can be really appreciative, and then others that go the other way and think that they know a lot more than they do. And I've certainly met a lot of both as a venue tech up until recently. Yeah, it's an interest. It's I'm not sure if it's because apparently Prince was actually very knowledgeable in terms of studio
Oh yeah,
work,
he knew frequencies and stuff. He could actually name stuff. So
yeah.
No. Prince. Yeah.
He was on another. Yeah, I've heard those stories too. I've met a few of his engineers, and he was my ultimate that I wanted. That was like the end all be all. Didn't quite get there, but he was my favorite artist. Like
in a weird way, like hearing all these stories, like before his passing, like I was like, in a challenge, I wanted to be like, all right, I want to be Prince's engineer one time. Just to be like,
I didn't even matter if I got fired. He fired the best in the business, so it was like, oh, okay, I got fired like everybody else. Like, come on, like just one good night on that band, which he always had slamming bands. So I was sort of that
this is the one artist where you could get fired from and no one says anything.
It's not a bad mark. It's like, oh, well, everybody,
everybody's gone fired by Prince.
See, this kind of brings me around to a question I asked on, I think it was one of Scott Adamson's Zoom sessions, and I think I've already got the answer from possibly one or two people. If we could all only mix one song of any artist, live or dead, one song, and then you retire, and it can be in front of whatever size audience you want, what would that one song be?
I think this is a good last ending question to end the session on. So
one song. Oh
yeah,
I mean, it would definitely be Prince, but it's like, wow, there's so many songs. Wow, I have to think it.
I've got one. As a not engineer, but Queen, the Prophet song.
Okay.
That song is just so much all over the place with all of their non-technical tools to make it work. It's amazing.
See, I'd like to mix Prodigal Blues by Billy Idol. I think the drums, just the drums alone, sound incredible. So I'd like to give that a blast.
This is slightly going to show my age and the generation I grew up in. I would want to mix My Chemical Romance's Welcome to the Black Parade.
Fair enough.
Nice.
I was so excited they were reuniting. I was so excited.
I know. I did monitors for them for their rehearsals, and they were sounding really good. I hate to tell you.
And I saw like someone had posted a full video on like one of the two like reunion tours, and I'm like, oh, my high school emo heart. It yeah, no, it was, and I got tickets, and scalpers. There's a special place in hell for scalpers. Like,
oh no.
Oh, but I'm so jealous of you that you got to be that close to them. Oh man.
They're really tight. I was like, I was never personally a fan, but when I got in the room, I was like, oh, okay, I see what everybody's talking about. These guys are tight as hell. Cool.
Oh, I would love to, if like as a dream front of house, I would love to. And Gerald's voice, just to me, like for my ears, just it's like he could sing me the Yellow Pages, and I'd buy it. everyone I'm sure has that artist where they're just like, oh my God, that their voice just, yeah.
Yeah.
I'll let everyone else sit.
Yeah, I guess if I had to pick, I don't know about one song. That's really tough. I can't even pick one artist, but certainly like, it'd certainly be something from either Nine Inch Nails or Massive Attack. Probably more Massive Attack is what I think. Yeah.
Nine Inch Nails always put on a good light show.
Yeah, fantastic. I've seen him a bunch.
Yeah, Trent's like one of the few people who's like, we were talking about resistance detective. From what I've gone from Trent, he seems to be on the other end where he's like, well, what's new? And like, I've tried to find this video. There's this video where he tried this video wall that was an interactive video wall. Like he could like do this. And I was just like, that's like, who else would like want to try that except him? To me, it's just like.
It's from the, shit, what tour was that? I can find it. I'll find it.
Yeah, we're in emails, and but yeah. So let's see, fella, did you answer or who's supposed to?
I said Prince, but I'm not sure what song. Maybe Baby You're a Star, old school.
Cool.
All right, I think that's a great note to end this on. Thank you all so much for coming into this. Like I was excited, nervous. I'm like, is anyone gonna show up? But like everyone who showed up did, and I'm just like, this has been an amazing.
So sorry I screwed up the time zone. I saw it in your emails, EST. That's the first time I've done this all pandemic.
Here's the good news, Jess. This isn't the last one we're doing. This topic's gonna probably come up in some shape or form or another. I'm recording this, and it's going up on YouTube. It'll take a while because it's a long one. But yeah, so you'll get to watch some of the fun discussions we've had. They went in some great places. So, and I'll just send you an email next week. Well, actually, as I was mentioning earlier, I'm doing an OSHA 10 class, but I'll send you email reminders next time. Be like, hey, just heads up. But hey, it happens. Time during this whole thing's kind of become really flexible and all that. But yeah, so I'm just going to end saying the recording and then on the meeting. Again, thank you all for coming. This has been awesome.
Yep. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
No problem.